again, everyone, and welcome to the regular Franklin Board of Education meeting. We have a roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Sprague.
Here.
Dr. Beer.
Here.
Mrs. Wachowski. Here. Dr. Kahn.
Here.
Mrs. Sapersky. Here. Mrs. Yank. Here. We are all present.
Thank you, and the meeting has been properly posted. We stand for the pledge again.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion is made by Mrs. Wachowski, seconded by Dr. Kahn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Community comment. Participants under this agenda item must be residents of Franklin Public School District or parents, guardians of Franklin Public School District. Do we have any community comment tonight? Mary wishes to comment. Please, 3 minutes, Mary. Does anybody else want to comment? I didn't grab the sheet. Apparently not. Don't worry about it.
No, it was me. I'm done.
Oh, you're done.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany. All right, go ahead, Mary, please. Thanks, Andy.
Mary Karolevich, 8208 West Coventry Drive. Thank you for the wonderful annual meeting. Thank you for considering boosting the 4%. We want to stabilize our school staff, and we have been hurting in this district. People leaving in and out, not good for kids, not good for families, and I know you know that. But if other districts around us can do it, we can manage to find a way somehow, and I hope that you do. But thank you for considering it. I do have a comment about the Education for Employment Plan. I find it interesting that we're doing this again. When I first came here to the district, I participated in a strategic plan. And one of the things that we had on our agenda and was, I don't know if it was truly ever implemented, was Education for Employment Plan, basically, where we would help students plan early on what types of coursework to follow in order for them to achieve what they wanted to become as adults or once they left the school district. And we talked about portfolios starting in the 5th or 6th grade, so that kids would know when they go to middle school, okay, this is what I'm going to take so that when I get to high school I can take this. And if I'm considering this when I grow up to be an adult and I still don't know what I'm going to be, I can work my way towards that end goal. But I have a concern. In the plan, you said that all students in grade 5 through 12 will meet with their counselor to plan for their coursework to meet college and career goals. Right now, or at least as of June, we had one counselor for 5 elementary schools. At the time when we talked, we had one counselor in each elementary school. I do hope that if you sincerely make 5th graders start thinking about what coursework to take and planning for their lives, that you will have more counselors available to them so that they can do that. Because I do think it helps our children, especially in today's fast-moving world, if they do have a plan in place that may help ease the anxiety that they feel. Maybe it will help with their mental health issues that we seem to be, that's run amok in our society for many reasons, I know, but I think school for a lot of kids can be very anxious. They can make it anxious and what am I going to do with the rest of my life, you know? So I sincerely hope that you mean to get more counselors so that they can help students. I really just think we need a counselor in our school. I know we have school psychologists, but they work with other things, and counselors concentrate on academic, at least in my humble opinion, they may concentrate on more academic things. So I hope that you will consider putting one counselor in each elementary school so that our 4th, 5th graders can get the help that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, nobody else for approve the consent agenda. If everybody looks at it, it was changed late in the game because of misprint. But I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion was made by
All three of us.
all in favor.
Can I just ask what you said?
There was a wrong name in somebody that owed money. It was spelling thing was wrong. Nothing changed materially. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. There are a few people that were just hired that I'd like to introduce. Leo Ekman is the new Director of Student Services. Welcome, Leo.
Thank you.
10 minutes or 15?
10 seconds, maybe?
And Cordell Smith is new Athletics and Activities Director. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you coming. All right. School board calendar, regular Board of Education meeting Wednesday, September 13th, 2023, and a regular Board of Education meeting September 27th and September 13th. I don't know if I said those in the wrong order. Update from the district administrator, please.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Leo and Cordell, also for being here, and don't feel good to stay all night. But we appreciate that you arranged personal calendars to be with us. So a couple updates in the district. Often people wonder, is it quiet in the summer? And we respond with a very big no, absolutely not. And especially in the last few weeks and leading up to welcoming students back, it's been very busy and very exciting. So I know I talked a little bit about our first annual leadership summit. We are quite excited about the success of it. That's not just how we evaluated it, but how we got feedback from our 95 plus educators that joined us and leaders those 2 days to really build on what does continuous improvement look like for us, how do we continue to carry out our coherence plan in this third year, and working on our action steps. So the new piece to this is that it's the first time we've done a larger summit as a district. And it's the first time that we've built out those teams to a level where we have all departments or grades represented in the schools. So that when we're saying we have a shared voice, we really are bringing different stakeholders to the table. We're really diving into that data and getting to that root cause level to get those action steps in that we're feeling it in the classroom. The conversations are often like, how will this feel and look different that we're reaching all students? So that was a big celebration. We did shout outs during the event, so little note cards that were filled out. And we had over 500 in 2 days, which I just think is very amazing. And the energy for anybody that was able to stop in is something that we just hope to keep going through the school year. But thank you to the whole team for their work on it. It took a lot of different, all of our principals jumping in, creating these teams, the dreaming about these teams that started back in the winter, and then the development of them to this point. There's people that are committed to making our system better every day. Transition days have been going on. The middle school 6th grade ones are complete. We have 283 students, which is 78% of that incoming class. It's quite impressive. If you came through on the first day, which was very rainy, you got to see the backup of traffic. So we especially appreciate everyone in front offices that saw that and went out in the rain to help ensure drop-off went safely. So that was a big success. Next week, we welcome our 9th graders. Today and tomorrow. Wednesday. Next week. Yeah, we have 203 9th grade students. That's about 50% of the class, which I think is also very impressive to bring in and just get ready and transition for the new year. Today, we welcome back our new teachers to the district. That's another team effort. Teaching and learning takes on a lot of pieces of organizing the curriculum and resources. HR does a warm welcome, and our whole team is really involved in building the launch and that community that goes on. We had a lot of positive feedback through our tools today too. As Mike Volo pointed out in his high school update to families, we have over 500 students that are involved in a fall sport already that have kicked off. I think when we think about the athletics and activities report we get about mid-year, if I'm remembering right, we talk about the importance of being in 2 or more activities. And it doesn't just have to be sports, it can be any activity and that involvement with your community and your achievement and success moving forward. So I think that's a big celebration for our team and the work that they do to keep our students and families involved. And a shout out to the families, because that means you have your athletic code meetings done and you get your kids ready, and that takes a lot too. And to all of our coaches to get geared up. Band camp is wrapped up, but if you're by the high school on any Wednesday, like tonight, may see them wrapping up their practice out in the field also. And then looking forward, we welcome all of our staff back on the 29th. On the 30th, we'll have all of our staff together in the morning for our bigger all-district welcome. And then we also have them here on the 31st. So a good balance of district and building time, a lot of balance to carrying out that leadership summit and also all of the staff in those buildings to make sure it gets to that student level. Franklin Education Foundation rounds out that week with their back-to-school celebration and the Milkman game on Thursday at 6:35. So we'll have a lot of attendees for that. And then Tuesday, September 5th, the most exciting day of the year, is getting out there, getting to the buildings and welcome back those learners and seeing the shiny halls and all the excitement and exhilarating feelings of going on for the year. So busy, and if you are looking for opportunities to be involved in the community, we have open houses 2 of the 3 nights that we have our staff back in 2 weeks also, so there's lots of visibility opportunities. Any questions?
Just new teachers, how many, and what's the age range of experience?
Sure, yeah, I don't know those numbers right off the top of my head, but I know Laura will do our staffing report as we get in the fall and finalize those. I would say it's around 40 that we're at with the new teachers I've had over there today. Years of experience was great, right? I don't know off the top of my head. A nice balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Reports, presentations, and other board business. Ed for employment update and profile of a graduate. Dr. Moe, Mr. Volo, Mr. Thompson, please.
Thank you.
Come here then.
Can you just hear me? How about that? I just wanted to, before I allow our speakers to speak, just take you through a couple of changes in that executive summary. Not big changes, but first off, to clarify, so we're bringing forward, it's not an action item, but we have to bring the Ed for Employment plan forward each year to the board, so that's what we're doing. As one of the updates for the Ed for Employment plan, we're gonna be talking about educator pathway. That has implications for the November meeting with course approval, so we may bring that portion of this back for review, but we're not getting into the nitty-gritty of that with this, we're just updating. So just so this part is an update, there'll be another kind of tangential part related as we go through, so just to clarify that. The second thing is you had 2 attachments in the executive summary, a copy of last year's plan and then a draft of this year's plan. That's still in draft form, and because that data continues to come in, we ran it again this morning and we updated 2 metrics in there. So I just don't want you to go and look and see health and career readiness went up from 68 to 71. So you'll see that it's different. They're not on purpose, but kids are still getting their credential in. And career ready went from 89 to 94.8, so made quite a jump. So this is the summer as kids are finishing. We'll talk about that a little bit summer. So if you're noticing why that draft document is now different, that one's not live yet. It's still an internal draft. It's because those credentials are coming in. So that's why those are working. So if there's no questions now about the logistics of that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Volo and Andy Thompson. We're good on that? Yes, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Mr. Volo or Mr. Thompson, I'll drive and you can lead.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about 2 of the specific strategic actions that were outlined in the 22-23 Ed for Employment plan. And those 2 were to, create and really get to having a profile of a graduate we can present to the board, which you will see shortly, and develop an educator pathway. So for the profile of a grad, that'll be our first step. And in terms of how we did this, and some of you recall even as recently as 1920, when we had Ed for Employment in previous incarnations, the team itself was a group that met, right? We had that team, we had some other ones in district where we would get together, community members, teachers, et cetera. And the last year of Ed for Employment was kind of like an existential, what is Ed for Employment as a team, besides the team that reviews the plan every year. And those of you who were with me on that, we were going to go see a musical in 2020, and then the world stopped, as I recall. We didn't meet again. But where we have reconvened the work is working in smaller ways around specific actions. So, and the groups that you're going to see Profile of a Graduate included, it's the idea of involving community stakeholders, staff stakeholders, and students in the actions that we're bringing to you. So in many ways, we're replicating what we used to do in high school library, years ago. And those were great meetings and groups, but doing so based on the actions the plan calls for. And then again, bringing updates to things like key communicators and other groups that we have and we're building and continuing in our system. So the first question there, and those are rhetorical for us right now, but these are the backbone of developing a profile of a graduate. So we have standards that Mr. Blessington brings to you annually to say, here's what we do in our courses in terms of educational outcomes. And we know that's not all of what a student needs to be successful in life. So when we go to the next page, or next slide, I should say, this statement, way too many words on a screen, but is one that we developed as a small core team going back 2 years in terms of what a profile of a graduate will do. So again, that word commitment to college, career, and life-ready skills, right? We transparently communicate that we collectively own and that we ensure our students have, right, in our system. So that is the why. Right? We want our students to leave Franklin Public Schools and to live our mission and vision of those students achieving their excellence and having a productive life. We need more than just the academics that we love and crave. And again, former social studies teacher, you know that. I love all the stuff that we learn in those classes. And I also love if our students are responsible citizens who can communicate, collaborate, and learn. So as we go to the next page, you might want to know a little bit of how. And I believe in key communicators, can't remember which meeting it was, but we did a little mini version of the profile of a graduate pitch that Andy and I did to all the buildings, but we visited every school in the system. We had every employee group have opportunity to give input in terms of what they believe students should have as a result of going through our public school system. And again, beyond the standard, academic instruction, we had students give us feedback, and we also reached out via community like newsletters, publications, and news channels to try to get input from a wide a base as possible. And what we then had was, and I have a snippet of it in the slide deck, was a whole lot of input. I can't remember how many, it's like 3,500 maybe submissions of, here's a quality, here's a skill, here's a habit, a disposition. And then you can see some of the affinity grouping that's there, right? So things like hard work, work ethic, appeared often, right? Growth mindset, those items. So what we did then is take those and try to affinity map those and wind up with what is it that our community shared with us is important for our graduates to have. If you go to the next page, this is the draft, and you'll notice when I say, Mike doesn't look that cool. I'm not sure if I like this word, and that's okay. But we can spin on language for hours, and I appreciate like those things. But this is the culmination of all of that input, and you'll notice there's some adjectives and there's some ways of being or qualities or things people can have. So, in order to be college, career, and life ready, and fulfill the Franklin Public Schools mission and vision, students will be kind, resilient, responsible, creative, and self-aware communicators, collaborators, thinkers, and citizens. So that's a bit of a combination of, again, qualities in terms of ways of being, right? You can be a creative communicator, a self-aware collaborator, et cetera, et cetera. And we believe this captures not only what we heard from, one group, it captures what we heard from all the groups. And, besides, students, occasionally we got a student who said, I don't know, in that, thing, or they're just concerned about, I just want to get into college. So I'm not sure what you want me to say right now. This does represent what we believe is a synthesis of those different stakeholder groups. And this is a starting point. It's not the end point. And I say that to say that, as long as I've been here, one of the things that's important to me and important to us is we don't have a profile that we just make a cool poster, slap it on a wall, and say we did it. There's a lot of school districts who are ahead of us in this work in terms of having one of these. And it's really hard work to take this and make it real in terms of teaching, learning, and outcomes for students. And that's the really exciting hard work. But until we have something we can look at and, say we're on the right track, we can't even get to that really hard work. So the next steps, if you go to the next slide, Jess, are really for us to, in the coming year, define and plan to integrate that profile into our work, right? building plans that Mrs. Bennon alluded to in terms of action planning that we engaged in last week developing, right? They're developed, absent this presence, right? So we're not going to then go to all those building teams and say, hey, your plan that has this, also do this thing too, right? That's how things don't happen successfully in schools, is to, just say we're going to do that too. But in terms of this has to eventually live in course development, live in daily teaching and learning in classrooms, and to piggyback off something that Mary had shared. Academic career planning was brought up earlier. Like, it's something that should live within that. So this is the start of a conversation in terms of what does our graduates demonstrate to us as a result of going through our school. So there's more to come in terms of developing and integrating that into our teaching and learning, and also potentially coming back and saying what are those things kids will do in terms of work-based learning experiences to demonstrate these qualities. Are there additional things that they'll do to demonstrate that they're ready to graduate besides 4 credits of English, 3 credits of math, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a conversation point that will continue, and I'll I've alluded to this before. What does a graduate need to demonstrate to us? And are there things beyond the academic credits that they earn that we might ask them to do as they go through certain years of school? Some proficiencies, portfolios, competencies that can demonstrate, show evidence of, get feedback on, because that's where the magic is. And any of these habits or dispositions or ways of being can only be useful if we pay attention to it, if we teach to it, if we get feedback on it, if kids reflect on it, just like the core academics that we do and love each and every day. So with that, Andy and I will be happy to take any questions or thoughts around the profile draft, and maybe, Jess, going back that way, maybe to the slide before, just so we can sort of see and again, the bold is the words that, are pulled from that collection of almost 3,600 responses. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Appreciate kids the way they are and let them know. I like self-aware, because kids, they need to know where their strengths are and what they do well and what they don't do well. And they need to know how kind they are, but the rest seems to be put them in boxes. And everything's different. Where's the diversity come through? We start getting into these boxes.
So for myself, when I look at these as something to kind of do, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of within communication itself and everything, but something that I will use these for, I'm going out to the workplace and, we're evaluating students. This would be a great way to get feedback that's like standard to Franklin that we can stand by. So I go any employer, we can kind of speak to these and kind of do that. But when it comes to kind of like the diversity, as you said, I think that, that's the hard work to come, is, we come up with the words, but then there's going to be time developing and getting into these conversations and coming up with that kind of along the way.
And I would add, Linda, that, respectfully, I think that these things, there's not a student in our system who I would think, regardless of their identity, where they're coming from, where they're going, that these wouldn't be things that we want for them. And I think that's to me the part of, like, I'm not sure if there's something specifically we'd want to add, in terms of these things, but there's not a student who I'd have who I wouldn't want to be resilient or kind, responsible. Like, I feel like those are pretty universal, and I don't feel like those put kids in boxes. I think that these put us in the transparent thing of saying this is what we value in students beyond, can you do your math? Can you learn the things in social studies? Can you write an essay? And all those things that get really finite and whatnot. I mean, that's why I don't think this necessarily puts kids into boxes per se.
I was just going to add, each of those words, I feel like has kind of spectrum. Like, you can say, this kid might be creative one way, this kid is creative a different way. I think each of those words allows you resilient in your own way, responsible in your own way. So I don't think we're singling kids out or anything, that not everybody can achieve those things, that everybody's achievement might look different.
I just really, so thank you for your work on this. 3,500, 3,600 responses is not insignificant. And I just really like that this is going to expand the ways that students can do school and succeed. You know, even when I was in school in the 90s, there was, you know, a few ways that you could be identified as a successful student. They tend to be mostly academic, perhaps athletic, maybe a little bit of artistry. But this just sort of expands the ways for students to feel like they belong and demonstrate their skills and abilities. And I also would suggest that to keep them 4 C's, you could make think they're cerebrum users or cognitator.
It's cognitator.
Cerebrum.
I have a friendly amendment to it that says cognitator.
Anybody else? Please,
Just to
Mary.
indulge me, I wrote self-confident, and I'm wondering which section, because I just feel so strongly that if a student is self-confident, they will just be mentally, emotionally, socially, academically stand out and just be a better person. So I don't know where you would put self-confidence. I'm sure it's up there somewhere.
Specifically, I believe that was one that there was a iteration that was there, and I believe correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but I thought resilient and self-aware were the combined where we thought that lived and moved into that. But, part of the work is defining, what do these look like? What do they mean? And even the idea of self-confidence and everything else, these are things and you define them together. You define them with the people who work in our system, the people who go to our system, and the people who support our system. So the work, this isn't a thing where it's all right, we're done, we did it, high five. Yes, we want the feedback to be able to keep growing and moving this forward, but know that there's going to be work to be done in our system to really make this something that lives and breathes and can function. So again, that's a great example, Mary, to where does that live? Where is this one? The number of people who say grit, work ethic, et cetera. And sure, so why resilient versus one of those other ones? I don't know if there's a magic reason. And we could probably wordsmith this for years. But I don't have that kind of time, and our students don't either. But it's that thing of the C's. You have no idea that. These are all things that have been in our head in terms of all these things. And again, one of the next steps you'll notice is pending board feedback. Creating that visual profile and working with Chad and some people who are really talented to work on the things that can be forward facing. But then that real work is what do we do with it as a system to make it real.
So you'll notice, if you remember, the Edford plan kind is written with always actions and then annual smaller chunks of things we do. So the new smaller chunk would be to continue that profile and graduate work, but take what we've done this year, so now we have the bigs and infuse them, measure them, live them. So that goal continues. So the strategic piece for next year will be to completely implement that. So that's where that connection will be a continued goal with kind of a new step.
So you're delineating, so these are just the small, titles you've given, and you're gonna delineate what all of those entail and how they're defined.
Most systems that are doing this work would say here's just like you have look for is around what it means to demonstrate success in terms of making a cohesive argument. And you can say this looks like this, students will be able to, or I'll be able to in that student first language. It's a very similar process for these things. So what does it mean to, and then what does it mean to do this when you're a kindergartner? What does it mean to do this when you're an 8th grader, a 12th grader, and everything else in between? So it really is a lot of fun work where it again that doesn't all live on a poster per se, but even that idea, it's on page 4 of the draft plan, is yes, there's the idea of brand visually thing that we can look at. And then there's that really, really fun detail nitty-gritty work, which is a lot of excitement for folks like me who love words and love to define how those words can manifest in our students.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, and we're definitely on the educator pathway.
All right. I don't think that I need to ask, Mrs. Lancour or anyone else in terms of why do we need an educator pathway? Why do we need people to go into this profession? And there's not a news story you're going to see where it says we did it. This state, this school district has now solved the, issue of people going to this occupation, which we need. So desperately, in terms of educator pathway, we have a lot of things that we do that really support specific things within, education-related fields. As you may remember from last year, we had students from our early childhood pathway come in, and remember that's birth to, about grade 3, so 8 years old, and those courses exist, and some of those students shared their work. And if you remember, those students are going into education, they're going into, being occupational therapists, those things. But when you look at the K-12 beyond that early childhood strand that's so strong, we really didn't have and don't have anything to speak of. So in pursuit of that, what we did was we put a group together, next slide, Jess, thank you, of K-12 staff from across our system. And they were part of an advisory that really said, who do we want to partner with and what do we want to do? The reason we say partner is we know that when students have post-secondary course experiences while they're in high school, that's a college and career-ready indicator. If they have those experiences while they're in our school, they earn credit in a college class. So think of advanced placement, think of CAP, think of the transcripted courses, the MATC. These would be in that same, wheelhouse. And then we selected a post-secondary partner based on feedback from local universities, as far-ranging as, Marquette, Carroll, to UW schools, going up to, Oshkosh, Whitewater, et cetera. We looked at all these different offerings of programs, none of which are necessarily better or worse per se. They all have things they want students to be able to do while they're in high school. And we looked at, what is the best thing to maybe go forward for us as a system. So the second part of a career pathway that the state would define is a state-recognized student group. And I can't remember the exact thing, Andy, that goes there. There's some abbreviation the state uses. CTSO. But specifically, think of FBLA for business or DECA for marketing. When you have groups like that associate, or HOSA for health occupations, you have Educators Rising is a state-recognized and nationally recognized group. So basically, it's like a club of future teachers. And Educators Rising is a cool name for it, for the national nonprofit and everything else. But they have competitions, just like FBLA does. They have state competition, national competition. But students, that's a key part of at least what the literature would say around educator pathways. Having a thriving pathway is getting kids excited about education beyond just taking a class or another class. So the two things our group really landed on, by studying other pathways, studying literature around educator pathways in the nation, where we need a strong post-secondary partner and we need to create and then have a thriving student group. And that would be Educators Rising. So the outcome that our advisory selected was UW Parkside as the partner of choice. And there's a proximity piece that goes with that, as well as the transferability. All the UWs, there is something to, you have to take so many courses before you wind up in an educator program. And every program we looked at had some combination of that, right? So you have to be admitted to the School of Education at UW Whitewater, UW Parkside, UW Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee, whatever it is. So you have to do things before you're in that program. And part of the thing they liked here was that these 1-credit classes combined to 1 3-credit class they call Foundations of Education. It can be taught by any credentialed staff member who has an educational master's. Right? And they involve, I believe it's 50 hours of field experience in schools, right, as a result of going through these classes. So I think it's like 20, 20, and 10 or something like that for each class. But kids would need to be in schools, our schools, doing things as would a pre-service teacher at university level in order to do this. We already have kids in our schools. You may recall the kids that we go to Pleasant View to do this. We go to the middle school to do that. They've been doing that for years. Well, we could have them do that and have that be part of a class that they're getting credit for at the collegiate level. And for the kids, and our kids are telling us they want to do it, right? Every year the seniors in their survey indicate career pathways. Students want to go into education, and we've told those students, please come back and work for us when you do. This year, I believe, I'm trying to think of the number of Franklin grads who were at the new teacher thing today. There was one 2018 grad who was there today, which was my first graduation at Franklin, and I'm trying to think how many more we had, but I think we had at least 2 more, if I'm remembering off the top of my head from the new teachers today. So if every one of them did that, we'd be in a great place. But those would be the class, or that would be the class we bring to you to approve this fall. So it'll be 0.75 high school credits, 3 college credits. And then just foreshadowing, we also would be coming to you for additional classes, at least 1, if not 2, for that next group. So, you know, the idea we'd have 1 class for the first year and then at least 2 or 3 classes for the next year. And students could, you know, start taking these, you know, immediately if we approve this for 24, 25. And then the idea would be growing that pathway. So kids really want to get an education, do it. Just like kids want to go into healthcare, please take the CNA class while you're in school and get that experience, right? It's good for them to know, you know, some patient-facing parts of the medical field. And, okay, this is, you know, giving more formality is what we've always supported and more structure. So Parkside is the partner. That would be the class we come back to you in, it doesn't have to be November, but sometime between now and November in terms of course proposals and approvals.
Yeah, so I think it's my turn now.
Well, any questions about the educator
Just
pathway?
questions, yeah.
It'd be 1 class for us. Our students would sign up for Foundations of Education. That's the class they'd sign up for at Franklin High School. And it is a synthesis of 3 1-credit classes that Parkside has. So they look at it as a 3-credit experience. You wouldn't take one in isolation. But like in that sense of like, it really is 3 different 1-credit experiences they have put together. So anyone going to education at Parkside has to take those 3 courses. And they probably have a bit more flexibility. Our students would just take 1 class, cover all 3, and get 0.75 high school credits, 3 college credits. Taught by our staff, wouldn't have to go off site. Anything in a quarter or half increment is fine typically, but it's just the translation of college credit hours. 1 college credit is 0.25 high school credits because of minutes and seat time and some other Carnegie unit stuff. I can't remember if there's a great reason for it. Professor Cromie might know, or Dr. Mo. Other than, I mean, he yes, it's the popular translation. It all comes down to like I don't know if there's a great reason, but like we wouldn't want to credit anything less than a quarter credit ever at the high school. You know, we typically do the half and the 1s because that's the game we always play. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason to why it's only halves or 1s for what we have. So, but like for us, like this would likely be a year-long class. So you're losing about a quarter credit of like opportunity by taking a year-long class and only earning 0.75 credits. But our credits, I mean, that's not the primary concern.
So part of the Ed for Employment plan is kind of the things that live in my world around the community experiences. So I just wanted to kind of give a brief update of some of the wins from the year, as well as some of the data and numbers that we're going to kind of see through the different programs that we offer. So this year, I thought that one really success to kind of start out was our board president, Mike Sprague, joined a group of myself and some community members, and we really talked about kind of the process that we saw at the high school, kind of streamline things and kind of tried to make it a better experience. And I learned a lot from the group, and I think it was an overall great win for everybody involved. Youth apprenticeship and community internship continue to kind of grow, and you'll kind of see that the numbers go up each year, and I'll kind of speak to those specifically in their own slides as we get to them. Hiring events. A good story that I had, you know, a few weeks ago, and sometimes the stories are really how you know how you're doing at things. Was out to dinner with family, and someone came up to me, and someone random, and I was in Milwaukee, and they said, "When are you having like one of your hiring events?" And it was someone that had just seen me at an event, and those are the types of things for me that kind of showcase that, you know, things are working and people are kind of becoming synonymous with their events. So I thought that, you know, we had 2 of those. We're already having another one of those next week. Because we kind of recognize the need that for students that do our nursing assistant program, we need to bring employers to them. So for students that went through the summer program, the spring program, we're having a hiring event next week at the high school for them. And kind of like an intro youth apprenticeship event for them as well. Throughout this school year, we had a DPI visit, which was really a great way to kind of showcase the amazing things for CT month that our staff do. We were kind of selected as a high school kind of for CTE as kind of one of the ones out there that they came and visited in February, and it was a great visit. They kind of got a tour of the manufacturing areas and welding, and it was just a great overall showcase of our staff and kind of the great things that they do. And then, just a couple other things, partnership through our capstone courses has been phenomenal with community members. It's really great when they're working on real projects for businesses. I got to take the business capstone kids to Bear Paw, which is Jellystone Campground. They kind of created a new ropes course. They needed a help marketing plan, and they presented to their entire board of directors, which is like 15 people that they kind of came in. And the experience for that they kind of do and everything was awesome to kind of see that. I think that, job shadows and stuff within field study is something we can kind of expand to other kind of scenarios, and kids that kind of have that need for job shadows. There's kind of a pipeline for that now as well. CNA just continues to be really strong. The numbers for it go up every year. I think that, a lot of you are in attendance at the breakfast. Hearing the stories that the students have to share is one of the great things of the job. And then, just myself, last week I was at a conference for CTE, and one of the things that seemed to be really successful of schools that are really continuing to grow the work is getting all the levers of your community to kind of work together in this work. So being on the board for the South Suburban Chamber, getting the Business Park Consortium, all those things together will really kind of move the work forward. A lot of the great examples at the board or at the conference were a little different because, we have such a densely populated area. So it kind of will be kind of unique to kind of challenge. But I think it's something that I think that'll help. So I'll kind of go into a slide for each one. But first, just to recap the 2 hiring events, this year we'll probably have 4. But 100 students, 35 employers. We had a trades hiring event, 275 students attended. These weren't all our students. We do open it up to other schools and students from the area, just because we feel like we want to provide a service to them as well. And 65 employers. So youth apprenticeships, up to about 40. So one of the cool things is youth apprenticeship has started an educator pathway, an educator YA. So that will kind of be really nice to kind of see, because I already know of a handful of students that'll qualify for that. So students that work at like a YMCA, a daycare, maybe at their local church, those types of things can qualify for a YA with that work. So that, and then as well, they created like a business administration youth apprenticeship, because a lot of business owners that I meet, they could have students do some work and learn the office dynamics, but before it wasn't a youth apprenticeship. Now I think that this is a more general business one that'll kind of give them some experience. So I think if anything, those will continue to kind of
Andy,
grow.
can you just remind everybody what a youth apprenticeship consists of versus, like the requirements in terms of hours?
So I look at it as 2 things. Youth apprenticeship is 450 hours, and it's for students that really kind of have a real good idea of what they want to do. So it's usually those real strict career paths. You go and you take your CNA class, then you become work as a CNA. You go and you take some classes in welding, then you work as like a welder. So they're really like strict, specific pathways, 450 hours. They have to take classes in school that align with that as well. It's a state recognized program. They can hours count over the summer as well. They usually kind of get release time out of the day to go to those. Community internships is the other piece that we have. That's 90 hours. And what I've kind of seen success with that is students do that in their junior year, and they kind of explore some different areas, and then maybe they step into a YA in their senior year. An example of that would be a student that was kind of in a more generic role, a construction company. He was kind of just doing some contracting work, like building decks, those types of things, saw lots of job sites, decided as senior year that he really liked what the HVAC technicians did. And then his senior year went to the apprenticeship for HVAC. So I see those internships as kind of just more of like testing out different things for students that aren't really sure what they want to do yet. Because that youth apprenticeship is a challenge. I mean, if you're a student athlete and doing a lot of things, it's hard to kind of do 450 hours. But we can make it work, and I think that they can still get a lot out of it. So community internship, like I said, it's kind of all about building the community with these. Something that I'm excited to do for this year is within the South Suburban Chamber, we've created like an education committee. And one of the things that'll be the goal of that committee will be, how do you bridge the gap between businesses and education. Businesses really want to help, but some of them don't know how to go about helping. How do they work with high school students? How do you work with young people? Because the most successful programs and internships experiences is that person on the other end for students, that mentor. So I think that we'll kind of do some trainings and just kind of showcase how you can work and how you can kind of get involved. And then CNA, I think, we've reached about 60 is what the peak will probably be each year. So we do about 20 summer, 20 fall, 10 or 20 in the spring is what it's kind of been averaging right now. So about 60 kids is where we've kind of grown. And I think that's last one, FHS internships. And I think some of these might delve more into community internships because these are interning with the teacher. So I think this will be a great marketing place for our Educators Rising Club, because a lot of these students have an interest with the teacher and kind of learning from them. And this could be a good place to kind of start to maybe grow that foundation of that club and kind of see where that kind of goes. So I know that was a lot of kind of data in a short amount of time, but what questions do we have? Yeah.
So I'm going to use myself as an example of a very mediocre parent as far as knowing what my child has. It says all high school students will have access to these. But my middle daughter, who's like type A, she got hooked up with the Conservancy because of Mr. Gain. I knew nothing about it, didn't know it was an option. He spearheaded it. How do parents find out about these opportunities so that they can take advantage of them on behalf of their kids or what have you?
I would say the best tool that has been used is junior conferences for students. So we give a pretty high attendance rate for junior conferences with students. The counselors talk about these experiences with the parents and families. And then through that, a lot of times I end up having follow-up meetings with parents or students from those. So referrals then to me if they have no idea, if they have a little idea. And I think that's a great tool, is I've been giving them a lot of great marketing resources and information to kind of showcase them what the different options are. So that's been kind of a way to kind of get the word out that I think has been the best. But
And I would add that, academic career planning, the phrase the states use is by all and for all is kind of the byline with that. And the reason I share that is that, every person who's working with students, ideally has some awareness of these programs. So Andy, part of what he does is try to educate our staff in terms of what we have available, what they can do. And then we all play a role in helping students understand that. So when I meet with my sophomores this year throughout their sophomore year, their journey, right, they're kind of going into maybe they're getting a little closer to wanting to have some experiences. And my goal will be for every one of those, students in my advisory. And obviously I'm more aware of these things because I'm the high school principal, so it's part of the gig. But like what I'm doing there also can be mirrored through all of our, advisors getting better. Our school counselors obviously play a role in that. And then, to that bigger point of like, how do we engage families, Mary, and, community, but families to really be aware of these things? Because I'm a parent in a different district and I can tell you what I read really closely and what I don't. And, I know more about our offerings than I do about the offerings my kids are taking. And I have a senior and I have a going to be sophomore. So I'm right there with you in that sense. And so what are those means that we engage people that in real communication that is received? Because it's in the book or it's in the thing. Okay, sure. And how often do we try to go through a 90-page course or academic career planning guide and memorize those things? We can't, right? There's too much stuff. So it depends on the adults who are working with our students as well. But then we just have to do a better job of helping people understand what's there. There's probably a disproportionate. The more, educators, community members who we see at all the things who are involved, their kids are doing these things at a higher rate. I don't have a true metric for that, but I can, anecdotally say that's the fact because, in terms of what's there. Same thing with early college credit programs, dual enrollment opportunities, internships, so again, how do we help everyone have access to that? And then what barriers do we need to remove to help kids get access to that? Like transportation, things that happen within the day versus outside of the day. Because there is some real opportunity gap, presented to us that's real. Because there's things that it's a lot easier if a kid has a car, can drive to the place, do the things. So how do we help every student have that regardless of, what they're experiencing outside of school? How do we do it during the day that we can, make work as well? So.
I will say that that's one of the things we talked about in several of our meetings last year, and I know it's being worked on at that level to get more and more kids involved because we have to get more and more kids involved. And, you know, sometimes the community's gotta meet us halfway too, but we do need to work to get people involved, and I think, I think we made a lot of strides, and I think we're gonna continue to.
Your numbers certainly suggested.
And I'd say, you know, kudos to Andy, you know, he's trying to engage teams in like smaller, more specific ways. So a community-based, you know, learning experience group that just sort of tackles that as almost like a task force. Like those are things that, and there's nothing wrong with how we previously met in bigger teams, but like really trying to have a purpose for bringing people together. And I think that's kind of articulated even some of those next steps of, right, like we worked on this, and it doesn't mean we're done, but like, you know, trying to bring people together around a problem or challenge we want to get better at, and then trying to then take those steps. I think you were a part of that, but so I applaud Andy for just kind of narrowing a focus and helping us kind of get better at this work. Because if you try to do everything all the time, you're not going to do anything well.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, master facilities study, Mr. Cromie, Mrs. Bennon, and several others.
And everybody who's patiently waiting.
Yes, thank you everybody for their patience. All right, so as Andy gets the slide deck up, he's also going to hand out a hard copy that you'll have, and like previously mentioned, we'll send this electronically this evening following the meeting. So tonight, we're going to spend a great deal of time dedicated to sharing all of the information that we could gather around our current facilities, the growth expectations in Franklin, and then how this is going to affect our enrollment and capacity moving forward. So it's really about transparency so you can be informed to make the best decisions moving forward. In the true fashion of continuous improvement within our district, tonight would fall in the, when you're thinking Plan, Do, Study, Act, we are in the study phase, which means you're going to get a plethora of information, abbreviated and brought to you to look at, to think about, to formulate questions, wonderings, clarity for us to bring back to you September 27th as we move forward, because that will be more in that continuous improvement cycle, the act or action area where we start talking about, now we have all this, what are some of the thoughts and plans we want moving forward? We want to make sure that you have the information you need to be informed so that you can continue to partner with the community on our next steps. So the last update that the school board had in our facilities was February of 2022. There was obviously some different faces at the table. Mr. Milsner was here, Dr. Miller, along with PRA, who's in the room with us tonight. So tonight we'll dive deeper into the long-term needs of our facilities, spanning over the next 10 years, rather than just a snapshot of maybe what's coming at us in the next year or two, which is more what you saw likely at that time. Like I mentioned, with a variety of the leaders at this table and in the district being newer, we've really taken the last year to dive and take a deeper look into our facilities, to build partnerships with a variety of people that we'll introduce shortly in the room. Architects, construction managers, people projecting our enrollment, working with the city to gain more understanding about growth, to ensure that we're really taking everything into consideration. Our goal is to plan, and always has been in Franklin, for a sustainable future, and what that new growth looks like and the pressure or capacity of our system. So the excitement you'll hear tonight is that we are a growing community, and that's a great opportunity. That's not an opportunity every school district has. So I like to look at opportunities as a gift. It's a gift, but it's also going to be a challenge, as we're going to have to layer a whole lot of pieces together to think about what's that impact, where's that impact, where will it stretch us, where will it maybe break us if we don't have some of those harder conversations. We have a community that trusts their children to us, and we want to continue and meet and exceed their expectations, much like our state accountability report tells us that we do. So tonight, again, is about gaining a 360-degree view of that, but it's one-dimensional. It's a one-dimensional look at our facilities. It's a one-dimensional look at our enrollment. So a lot of the information to digest tonight it's a lot of information to digest in one night. But the purpose also is to put a three-dimensional look to that and to set up some of these tours of our facilities over the next month so that you can hear what's going on or see some of the things tonight, but also walk through and actually see what that looks like in the schools, and also the functionality. Because sometimes walking through a school during an open house, or when there's not anybody in it, is very different than when you're watching pick up and drop off patterns, movement within the buildings, capacity within the classrooms, and what that looks like. We've been thoughtful in putting this out here tonight and putting time between now and September 27th, or just that, to be very transparent about everything that we know, giving you time, as we like to do, to digest and think about it, to provide those questions to myself or Andy, because that's really what we'll use to also start to formulate the discussion for us on September 27th. So on that note, not all of your questions will be answered tonight. And I know that sometimes can be hard, but what I've reminded myself is that it is a long process. It's a meticulous process. It takes thought and then rethought, because what we might think works somewhere, we know our assumptions might get challenged. So some things tonight, when we get to the end of the presentation and take questions, we may be able to answer. And some of it we may need to go back and discuss as a team, bring more of our expert content knowledge into it. But the blessing is that we have great partnerships with experts in those areas that we've been able to lean on and already kind of take on some of those challenging conversations. Oh, now we'll see if the slide deck's gonna work. Sorry, there's the purpose and background. So 3 major components of this work, the first 2 of which we'll really kind of get at tonight, are the full master facility study. I'll introduce those people in a minute, and then also our projected growth in Franklin and what effects that will have on our enrollment. Moving more towards September and beyond, we'll start developing and bring to you a draft of those guiding principles that we want to consider. And those really are a consideration, especially when we think about our elementary schools. Sometimes I've heard, well, why not the middle and high school? Well, the blessing here is all of our students experience the same middle school and the same high school. So when we're talking about what the middle school needs may be, which are minimal, it's brand new and beautiful, or what our high school needs are, we just need to talk about that one environment. When we're talking about our elementary schools and these guiding principles, it's really what we're going to collectively decide that's going to guide our thinking as we talk about where our schools are being stretched, where we maybe need to look at growth, and making sure that if my student goes to school A, B, or C, that experience for the student at school A and that environment is relatively similar to what it is in B, knowing that it won't look exactly the same. So we've also worked with project management professional to work through this with us tonight. So the partners in the room, much awaited. So we're gonna first start out in a few minutes here. Andy Daniels is gonna lead through our master facility study, but with C.D. Smith. So we have Mitch Kidd and Holly Brenner with us. They started partnering with us a number of months ago, and have had the opportunity to go through all of our buildings extensively, look at past data on our buildings, collect their own, and start to project out what those costs are. We also have PRAs, familiar faces in the room. So Nick Kent, Devin Kack, and Paige Steed. They are with us again. Again, you would have talked to them in the past. They've been with us for a number of projects. Mark Roffers is in the room also. He is the person that's going to talk to us about our projected enrollment, what growth looks like in Franklin, and the work that his team has done behind that and with the city. And then Mike Hacker is also with us tonight, and he's with Cadence Consulting, and really is the project manager working to make sure we're not missing spots so that we have all the right pieces and right people in place to keep you best informed to make some decisions. So goals for tonight. We've just met our partners. You're going to meet them a little more intimately as we get through these discussions. We're going to present, synthesize information in hopes that we're out of here before midnight. If it wasn't synthesized, it would be weeks. But it's very thorough. And then also, in thinking forward and projecting, we're looking at what does this look like moving forward tonight. Again, that study, that a lot of data, ask the questions or the clarity that comes to mind initially. Try to take away the temptation to jump ahead in your packet.
Okay.
And really hear what everybody in the room is going to say. I know that that's difficult. I would be the same way, trust me. But to really hear and jot notes also on that packet that you have so we can bring those questions and wonderings around. They don't all have to come out tonight. That's why we have over a month. That's why you have all of us to lean on and send those to. Like I said, that will come back September 27th as part of our guiding pieces, along with the draft of those guiding principles. And then we start the real fun, right? The action, and this continuous improvement cycle of what are we going to do with all this information and where do we start? Any questions on the process, people in the room, or just jump in it? Are we excited? I'm excited.
Get her done.
All right, so facility master study. Andy, I'm going to pass off the clicker to you.
All right, the fun stuff.
the most exciting things to talk about tonight. So I'm obviously joined by Mitch Kidd and Holly Brenner. They did a lot of investigating in the building, so they might be able to answer some questions, and they're going to kind of just jump back and forth with me and cover some of the presentation. So when I joined the district, one of the first of many tasks that I needed to look at was our facilities, really start dissecting and knowing what we've done in the past, what we have ahead of us, budgets, all that stuff, right? Like how are we going to maintain these buildings? So I started looking at previous data, like we had the PRA study, you know, that was something that I needed to get through. We had data from our mechanical contractors that gave me a lot of good information on the condition and the amount of mechanical equipment we have in the district, roofing studies we had. So I needed to start really like looking into that stuff. And then we knew that we needed to partner with some other people to really just figure out, like, really get really deep into this. I met with principals right away. I met with custodians right away. They had things that I didn't feel were really captured in some of the other data that I had. So I wanted to really meet with some of these stakeholders and figure out what are the needs of these buildings? What do they really look like? So eventually we did bring in C.D. Smith to help with that. There was a lot of hours put into this. And these are just hours that I know about. I don't know how many hours PRA had in this. I don't know how many hours Casey Stumval had into some of these things. I don't know that, but I know that over the last, since I think we brought you guys on in April or May, they spent some evenings, they spent some actual daytime hours where school was in session, where we got to engage not only with principals and custodians, but we got to engage and have some actually fun conversations with some of the teaching staff as well. So it's kind of a well-rounded conversation that we had. We really reached out to a lot of different people and had some good conversations to help develop the plan and really look at what the facility needs are. So now we had all this information. It was a lot of information. We have literally identified 701 things that we need to address in this district, right? So we needed to do something with that data. We couldn't just put it out there. Now we need to do some organization. So we broke it into categories. So tonight you're going to see 3 categories. You're going to see then some subcategories and then the actual project issues, okay? I'll just move right on to that. So one of the categories, you're going to see that it's kind of the same theme as we move along through the presentation, but it's going to be the interior and exterior building issues. That is a category. The subcategories under that category are the building shell, life safety, roof, ADA, pool, interior finishes, okay? Again, then we'll move into some other categories and explain those subcategories. But for, again, building shell, what we're really looking at is what's the masonry look like on the outside of these buildings? What's our building envelope look like? You'll hear me reference building envelope a little bit tonight. What are our windows? Again, building envelope. What is our base floors, joints, exterior doors? Are those functioning? Are they rusting out? Things like that. What are our roof systems look like? What's our ADA accessibility? You know, is there life safety issues that we have to address? What are those interior finishes? We have wall coverings. We have some actually really great wall coverings, but unfortunately, everything has a life expectancy and they're starting to peel off or kids are tearing them, right? Ceiling systems. You know, when you got roof leaks, because we have a lot of roofing systems and a lot of them are getting to the, like, beyond their life expectancy, that comes with then roof leaks, which then has an impact on our ceiling systems, where the guys, I think we have a wonderful buildings and ground staff. They try to do their best to keep up with the roof leaks and replace the ceiling tiles and that sort of thing. But sometimes, you know, they have other things and, you know, we end up having some ceiling system issues. And not to mention that those actually have a life expectancy. Ceiling tiles, ceiling grid, they have a life expectancy. Over time, they yellow out. Over time, certain light fixtures will actually, the heat from the light fixtures will have wear and tear. It's amazing what how these buildings function. And then the pool, which is obviously specific to just one building, the high school. Anything to add at all? Okay. And then the building systems. So this is, we actually call it MAPS, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We called it actually plumbing, electrical, HVAC here. Again, like just some really big systems here. Just for mechanicals, we have 620 different pieces of equipment that we've identified to this point, just within our 8 buildings. And there's a lot that, at least 150 items that are gonna be needing to be replaced within the next 10 years. Plumbing, you know, we've done some of that work already, but our domestic water systems, so that your hot water systems, your water system that feeds your bubblers and hand washing. You know, we analyze that, those sorts of systems, sanitary wastewater, you know, where does the water go after it leaves our building? And actually before it leaves our building, and then obviously electrical. So some of those projects in there aren't just electrical. We might not think of them as electrical, but PA systems, that's electrical. Clock systems, that's electrical. So those fall under that subcategory. And then HVAC, again, I kind of already talked about that. A lot of equipment stuff just doesn't last forever. And then the final category that we broke this out into is specific to just the exterior. Not so much, we identified exterior in that first category, which is more that building envelope. These are like really the sites, like our athletic fields, our concrete sidewalks, our asphalt parking lots, landscape, natural turf area surfaces, you know, actual grass, and then stormwater as well. I'm going to go back just a little bit because obviously we have some pictures on 2 of those slides, but what you're going to see up in that first picture saying failing roof, you know, pictures aren't always worth 1,000 words like we say they are. So we did the best that we could to just kind of give you some ideas of what some of these projects that we identified. So we have a failing roof there in that first picture, the one to the right, that's an actual soffit crack around the columns. These aren't just projects that are like, we can do that for a couple $100. It's more than that. There's something else that happened. There's something structurally happening with some of these things. And then like a deteriorating window sill. I think that was at Country Dale or Pleasant View. We didn't really put them here. I could put pictures of boilers up there for you guys. I could put pictures of maybe what an inside of a pipe looks like, but I don't feel like we need to like show you guys all that. But anybody here familiar with that picture with the cone? That's at the high school entering the Parks and Rec building. You know, concrete, again, concrete, like the message I'm trying to send home is everything has a life expectancy. Eventually we need to replace it. You'll hear later on in my other presentation that we are doing a lot of good things from a preventative maintenance standpoint to extend the life expectancy of these. But as much as we invest money into preventative maintenance plans, eventually the life's gonna wear out on these systems. So yeah, there's that one at the bottom with the level, that's actually like an ADA issue. There's some tripping hazards, things that we're gonna need to address. So once we got through the categories, obviously shifting around to the issues doesn't stop. Now we needed to really look at how do we prioritize this? Like we need to be able to take this information and kind of use it as a guiding light for how we move through and make decisions, right? So now we needed to prioritize it. So we use a priority level of 1, 2, and 3s. 1, you'll see that it is in the next 2 years. So anything from 0, what needs to be addressed now, into the next 2 years. Sorry, I'm just gonna grab some water. So more of like an immediate need, it feels like. And then our priority 2s. Those are our needs within the next 3 to 5 years, and then our priority 3s would be what do we need between 6 to 10 years, okay? We can obviously label those things that, but then what really took us there, you know? So we have to ask ourselves some questions. You know, is the system beyond its life expectancy? Is it really not functional anymore? Is it, are parts becoming unavailable and, you know, we're gonna have to replace it because we can't get parts to repair it? Is it disruptive? This is one of the more important ones. How disruptive is this to the operations if this fails? Are we shutting down school? If we are, like, that's gonna be a high priority if it fails. And then code or compliance issues that just by law, we have to do some replacement or repairs. And then priority 2, very similar, right? How close is it to that life expectancy? Is it nearing life expectancy? Is it also having some functionality issues, just not as frequent? And then frequency of repairs and costs as well. You know, you're not only paying for labor multiple times on certain pieces of equipment, but as we know, inflation has really hit us, not just with labor costs, but also material costs. And then the final one, again, 3. I don't feel like we should underestimate the 3s either, because it is just a short ways away. But again, how close are we to life expectancy? What's the functionality issues at this moment? And then again, are we seeing increased maintenance costs? So asking those questions helps us develop where these projects fall into that priority list. And then we didn't stop there. And then we had to add some costs to that, right? And there was a lot of collaboration, previous data, new data, that we used. CD Smith really headed this up. I appreciate the efforts, not just with obviously estimating costs, but just throughout the whole process. But they help plug in a lot of those numbers based on previous projects that they've already done. You know, they're a construction management firm. They do a lot of work, not just in educational, but hospitals and things like that. So they are the experts on knowing, like, today's numbers. Like, if we were gonna do this project within the next 12 to 18 months, this is likely what that's going to be. We use PRA's numbers. They had supplied some numbers from their previous study. Honestly, I've done a lot of these projects myself, so I was able to give some input. So that's what helped us develop these costs. It's important to know that these costs, again, and I'm gonna come back to this multiple times, these are really 24, 25 numbers, okay? We're kind of closing out 2023. I'm wrapping up projects for 2023. In fall of 2023, I started looking at what we're gonna be starting to do next year, and I start maybe doing some bidding, start talking with the contractors. Those projects are really gonna be done within the calendar year of 24 or our 24-25 school year, right? So that's why we are using that figure right now. But these numbers that we are sharing with you tonight are the 24-25 estimates. And we're gonna refer to these numbers that we're sharing tonight as estimates, but in a later slide, we'll also talk that there are low costs or low estimates and high estimates, and we'll explain why that is. Was everybody able to read that?
Yeah.
We wanted to show you, with this specific slide, we wanted to show that we have this plan now for every single building, okay? That's what just popped up there. We are gonna start with Countrydale, and we're gonna focus more on Countrydale because that's just our oldest building. That's how we're prioritizing the following slides. But a lot of the things that you're gonna see in Countrydale, it's kind of across the board. You know, like, I don't think you wanna hear me say the same things about Pleasant View and Southwood Glen, even though we just covered them in Countrydale. But here's what's important to me. This is what the plan looks like, okay? This is, I mentioned guiding light earlier, but really the way I look at this is like my compass, or I look at it as like my GPS. Like, we plug in those directions and we actually have some options. We don't always get that direct route. You know, they don't just say, well, here, this is how you get there. You have options. Do you avoid highways? Do you avoid tolls, right? Maybe there's some construction that you have to do some sort of detour. That's the way that I look at this. So now I know the direction that the district, I know what we need to, like, reach, but how we get there is gonna be a question that we'll have to answer at some point. And to be honest, and I didn't really cover this in the priorities, so I'll come back to that right now. What we have in a priority 1 right now is probably it's gonna stay in a priority 1. But a priority 2 overnight could become a priority 1. A priority 3 overnight, over a winter with our Wisconsin weather, could very easily become a priority 1. A priority 1 won't become a priority 2, and a priority 2 won't become a priority 3. But I've seen that actually happen. So again, that's like all of a sudden that road construction happens. That's where all of a sudden I'm taking a detour. I have to move a project up. Okay.
We're saving our questions till the end.
I just want one example of what you're talking about.
Of what, of a type of project?
That could become serious.
I think we've seen it with
Absolutely.
like HVAC systems and things like that, where it's like nearing life and you're trying to get a couple more years and things just happen.
Lightning hits the roof.
100%.
Yeah.
I'll give you,
I
I'll
understand.
give
I
you
want
a
something-
I will give you a real example. Domestic hot water heater. Wasn't even on our radar in my previous district.
I
all of
want
a sudden
something
it
in
just-
this district, pick one of those projects
Okay,
in
okay,
your big book.
I'm sorry,
there.
Linda. Okay, so Southwood Glen, when I first joined the district, wasn't on our radar. We had to do an emergency replacement on the domestic hot water heater at Southwood Glen. That's how quick that can change. And I'll actually share some of that information later on in my second presentation.
Like an idea.
Yeah,
I got
no,
hot
it's a
water in
good
my house.
question.
Got it.
I mean, but roofing's another really good one. We have roofing sections that are 25, 30 years old, that maybe, like, the repairs haven't been that bad on them. So do we really need to replace those maybe in the 0 to 2 year? Maybe those fell into the 3 to 5 year. However, if we have a harsh winter, maybe we have some straight line winds that's knocking the HVAC equipment around on the roof and it makes tears in it, that's how quick that can become a priority 1. So, Countrydale, all right. I'm gonna share some building data with you. You can see that there's some renovations that were done. So again, the constructed date, to the best of our knowledge, is 1953. I laugh because we and PRA talk about that from time to time. But you can see that there's multiple renovations, okay? What you'll see here when I say top priorities, these are not just, I don't want us to get lost that, okay, we only have roofing, mechanicals, electrical, plumbing there. No, we have a lot more than that. We have 103 projects identified at Countrydale. 36 of them are roofing, mechanicals, electrical, and plumbing. These are the projects identified with the most capital. So basically, if I take my spreadsheet, I look down, roofing's 1 point some million, I'm using that as an example. That's a high number, okay? So that fell into there. Mechanical systems, we know that that's gonna be a high number based on the data that we pulled, that showed up. But there's other things like window replacements, there's grading issues, there's basketball hoop issues. We're not gonna talk about that. What I'm really focused on is really what the big ticket items are at this point, but we can't get lost in the fact that even these little things add up to major capital needs. So here they are. So we were given a couple different visuals here. Pie chart showing what the priorities are. So priority 1, again, 0 to 2 years. Priority 2, 3 to 5. Priority 3, 6 to 10. And then the associated costs with these, okay? Then at the bottom, you'll see like a bar graph. We broke that out by those categories that we talked about earlier, and that's interior and exterior, building systems, and then exterior improvements. Again, you'll see the asterisk behind that total figure that we have up there. Again, those are just costs based on, let's say that we were able to find the capital to do all these projects at Countrydale. That would be 24, 25. The further we push some of these things down the road, the more likely that's gonna get to be more expensive.
Can I ask one question? When we're talking about these schools, or we're talking about these priorities, are we talking about things that need to be done or the school can't open? Or are we talking about these are things that you need to do on a normal school anyway, and I don't know how much, like the roofing is every 20 years, not just necessarily with Countrydale, but with all the schools. What?
So the district has already been doing some of these things, right?
Mhm.
Like, nothing, in my opinion, nothing's been ignored, but I know those costs are gonna be sticker shock, right? Because when we have so many buildings, and we have buildings such, I'm gonna use Southwood Glen as an example. That's original roofs. Actually, let me take it back. Ben Franklin, that's original roofs. That building was built in 1998. Do the math, we're at, what, 20-some years on that building. A roof on your house is only 20 to 30 years. That doesn't change for educational facilities or any other type of facility. Those are original roofs. So we officially have, I don't have the data in front of me, but every roof section at Ben Franklin needs to be replaced within the next 0 to 10 years. So the district's been doing some of that, and now I'm digging into my report a little bit, but we did 3 of those roof sections at the high school this year. So you guys have been tackling these projects, but there's a lot of projects that just all of a sudden, build up. They push the carpet up against the door and there's a big mess there, right? This is not uncommon to a whole lot of districts. This is very common. I had worked on the same plan in my 2 previous districts. It's a lot to take in sometimes, but everybody sometimes a lot of people get lost like, well, what's been happening? The stuff just piles up. It just piles up. Did that answer your question, Mike? Did that help?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So moving on, we'll go to Pleasant View. And by the way, the way that we have this presentation laid out, it's elementaries first, but by order of construction, and then we'll go into Forest Park Middle School, high school, and then the ECC. So again, this building was constructed in 1963, our second oldest building. You can see there that there was 4 renovations done to this building, 2 kind of more recently when we started talking about, there were some ADA issues, like 20-inch doors to get into bathrooms. If we had students in wheelchairs, we could not literally get them into the bathroom and turn them around. They could not be self-sufficient like what I believe our goal is, right? So previous administration made some of those decisions to do some ADA updates, which then because of that, it led into doing a secured entrance at that building, right? But again, no different than Countrydale. Again, it's going to be a common theme. Top priorities, top capital, is going to be the roofing, mechanicals, electrical, and plumbing. There are actually 92 projects identified there. I don't know how many of those actually worked out to be the roofing, mechanicals, electrical, plumbing, but just a lot, there's 92 projects identified there at this moment. And I guess I should come back a little bit because I missed, I didn't get a chance to say that earlier. There might be projects right now that it's not on my radar, okay? They're very easily, like, something could have been missed. I feel like we did a really good job digging in, dissecting, but maybe we missed something, right? And it's also important to know, going back to those priorities, there's roofing sections that aren't even in this plan because they're not needed in the next 10 years. They're maybe needed in the next 11, 12, 13 years. This plan, how I plan on using it, is I will constantly reassess. I will constantly look at how we're functioning, what's happening, and I will update that plan once for sure, maybe twice a year, and reevaluate it, and maybe new projects come in that weren't on our radar. Or maybe those roof sections that are only 11 years old, they're gonna come in because now they're 10 years old. Maybe that boiler that is only maybe that boiler that, I might have misspoke there, but maybe that boiler that's now pushing 20 or 15 years, but we're starting to have some mechanical failures with that, that might get moved into that plan, but it might not be in that plan right now. Pleasant View. So obviously we just talked about that. A little bit different here. 10 million is really what the estimated cost is at this point. If you go back to Countrydale, there was a lot more capital needed in the next 0 to 5 years. This one is spread out a little bit better, but it's still, we're pushing 8 million in the next 0 to 5 years. Robinwood, third oldest building in the district. I'm gonna be 100% honest here. I feel like it's the oldest building in the district. It was constructed in 1967, had a handful of renovations. You'll see what I did here is I actually added the fire alarm system. That's a major component. That's the only difference really on this slide versus the previous 2 slides that I added. Again, because that's a big ticket item. But again, roofing, mechanicals, electrical, plumbing. Cost by priorities. This is our facility with the most capital needed at this moment of the elementaries, okay? Pushing 14 million in the next 0 to 5 years, priority 3, and then we're dipping down to the 4.5. Again, it's just, there's a lot going on there. I mean, I can think about play structures that at some point I might have to go to Janine and say, like, we have to shut down this play structure. She actually approached me this year, can we do it this year? It's just not on our radar, you know, and that's not even part of those. That's in these estimated costs, but it's not, like, obviously I didn't make that a top priority.
How many projects at Robinwood?
94.
Thank you.
Southwood Glen. So our second newest elementary, built in 1991. No renovations at this point, right? So now we're on a lot of the original systems. So original roof systems, like I said, I believe 3 of those roof systems have already been replaced under Casey and Mark's watch, my predecessors. But that still leaves a lot of roofing systems that needs to be replaced. But again, that's 1991. We're in 2023. That's what, 32 years old, right? So no surprise that we need to start really thinking about those replacements, and no surprise that we're starting to have roof leaks. I could share some stories literally from the other day. We had that nice rain, right? We needed it. Well, the thing that I think about with rain is what's gonna be leaking. Thankfully, the roofing sections that we were doing at the high school, I thought for sure we were gonna have issues there. Yeah, we had issues at the high school, just not where the roofing was currently being replaced. But we pretty much had them around the district, okay? And again, what stands out in this one is gonna be the fire system. But again, like this summer, last year, we replaced that domestic hot water system, or heater. Domestic hot water piping was failing as well, so we did that this summer, where we were literally springing leaks in classrooms, where then we had to cordon off an area so that the kids weren't walking through water on the floor, okay? But we did tackle that this summer. So here's where we land here. Priority 1s and 2s, we're pushing 8.5 in the next 5 years, and then priority 3. Again, you can see kind of like that spread out a little bit, just like Pleasant View was, but 11 million there. I'm gonna reiterate here, I'll probably do it one more time. Again, 2024, 2025 numbers. We're not accounting for inflation at this moment. Ben Franklin, our newest elementary, again, 98. So that means our systems are getting to be in the 20-year-old mark. There has been some other maintenance or replacements done just because boiler systems. I wish that some of the boilers that we put into these buildings did last 20 years. I do have a boiler system that I do believe will last 30 years that I intend to put into these buildings. But they weren't. So there has been some boiler replacements and things like that already done there. But a lot of the other original components are still in the building, specifically the roof again. I mean, every single roof section is coming due or starting to have some repairs. So that was one of my stories that was shared with me. The guy spent a lot of time, our wonderful custodian over there, Matt Balistreri, calls me. He's like, who do you want me to get out? I got a leak here. And I got another one. You ready for this? It kind of looks like the roof is pulling apart from the building. So I haven't had a chance to go look at it yet, but we'll be working with it. I shouldn't have maybe shared that. We're going to investigate that. But I see some of that at Robinwood. That during the tours, I'll be happy to show you guys. But you'll see that the plumbing portion of this fell off. We're not really seeing too many issues. Like, yeah, the domestic hot water system will probably need to be replaced, but I'm not seeing any failures with the piping like we saw at Southwood Glen. So you're not seeing plumbing on this slide, but it's roofing, mechanicals, and electrical. So like just really maybe to talk about that, like so those priority ones and priority twos, that's what we're talking about. Like the bulk of that capital is the roofing and mechanical systems. But again, these little projects add up. I don't remember who asked it. Was it you, Debbie? You want to know how many projects there?
I need Southwood Glen too.
Well, we're past it. I'm sorry. 87 at Southwood Glen and 86 at Ben Franklin.
Thank you.
But when you guys dive into those packets, you can really take a look at how that's broken down by interior and exterior. I didn't really focus on that tonight, but I think it's important to also understand, like, building systems. That's the category. We know that the subcategory is mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. So that might help you wrap your head around some of this. Are you guys sick and tired of hearing Mitch talk already? You're doing a good job.
Yeah.
All right. Forest Park, you're not going to see a whole lot here. There is going to be a number that comes up, but like there's some explanations that I'll offer for that, right? You're going to see play surface, like whoop-de-doo, right? The kids are using that grass area out across the street a lot. That's a big ticket item to really bring that to the point where like the kids, like it's not going to be mud, that we're actually gonna be able to grow grass. Our wonderful grounds crew, and I mean that when I say that, they've tried all the efforts that they possibly could try. Fertilization, letting it grow longer to get the root system deeper, planting some seed, watering, all those things, and it's just not working out. And unfortunately, I've had an experience like this in the past where we ended up having to redo the whole area, okay? But that's kind of a bigger ticket item. It really falls into priority 2. I don't feel like it's a priority 1, right? But then there's also some other projects in our plan, other issues that we identified, that we're actually still working with the previous CM to get some warranty work out of. So, but I still wanted the things in the plan because one of my annual updates to the plan will be crossing things off the plan, showing what our progress was like, so. And then the high school. So again, this is our second oldest building. It was constructed in 1961. Our obviously biggest building, saw the most renovations, most recently in 2018. There was some remodeling that happened up there. I think 2014 was the PAC. But we have a few more top priorities here, and that's besides the standard that we've already talked through, we have flooring, ceiling systems, and then of course the pool. Flooring and ceiling maybe doesn't sound so emergent, but there's floors and ceilings failing up there. I talked why maybe ceilings, but flooring doesn't last forever either. VCT is the most common that we have in these facilities today. And sometimes when you start digging into those projects, well, you have to go and test for asbestos, and that might bring up the cost of those projects. But there's a lot of VCT, even some other types of floor coverings that are failing. So when I say flooring is failing, that means the tile is cracking out, yeah, we can pop another tile in. Aesthetically, it looks bad. Sometimes it creates trip hazards because it doesn't lay flat. It looks odd. And then all of a sudden, more crack. And it's like, okay, now I gotta get the environmental management consultants in to test because now I actually have to bring in a contractor to do the replacements. And then that's when we might find some of those ACMs. ACMs are everywhere. We're not getting around it, but the district obviously has a surveillance plan and a plan to handle those. And then the pool. Everybody familiar with the challenges of the pool at all? Okay. We did kind of the bare minimum of the summer to make sure that it's operational through the school year, but I don't think those repairs aren't gonna, last years. I'll let that sink in. Thank you. That's a big number. Almost 10 million or 9.5 million in the next 0 to 2 years, but if I really combine that in the next 0 to 5 years, we're looking at 27, close to $28 million. And then priority 3 is another 4.4.
Do you have a rough idea how much of that is the pool?
I do off the top of my head, but that, I'll tell you what I'm not gonna say ballpark. I know where it's at, but I don't have that in front of me. But I'll caution you when I tell you the number in the sense that that's to repair it as it is. That doesn't change the functionality of it. Like, we can't have certain competitions in that pool. So if that's something that the district wants, that changes that number significantly. But I believe it's around 1.2 million to really bring that pool, I would say maybe to par, where we have an actual filtration system that's not problematic, where we actually have a chemical feed, I'll call it. It's got a diatomaceous earth system to treat the water right now and filter it. That's a very old type of system, and typically you let that system take care of its own, and you add that product to the hopper. Right now that's not working. The guys have to manually add that to the filtration system. So
1.2 million to the pool would, and I don't want to get bogged down in the pool, but 1.2 million to the pool would get us 5 years from now or something.
Like life support?
Yeah, I
3
think
years
that
or
I wouldn't put
less.
my eggs in that basket. What did you use? Yeah, I'm not confident on answering that, but that would take care of a lot of the
You'd
needs.
take the under.
It would take care of the filtration side of it. The thing that I'm afraid of is when they drained the pool this summer and repaired some of the tile work that was on the floor and in the gutters. And they started noticing that this is spreading, the adhesive that's been there for years on that tile work is starting to give. It's just not working anymore. It dries out, right? Or if water gets in there, it's chlorinated pool. That's gonna wreak havoc on the mastics that holds the tile in place, right? They noticed that there's cracking when they were walking along it, so I don't know that necessarily addresses all of that.
Okay.
It's go ahead,
Yeah,
That's enough.
There
of
you
an
go,
answer.
Mitch.
There's
Yeah,
really
Mitch, go ahead.
there's a lot of equipment that with the chemicals in there, they're functioning, but they really could go at any point too.
Okay.
But if we did the 1.2, I still feel yeah, that's the mechanical side of it, and some of the floor work or the tile work and things like that. But there's still some other functionalities of that pool.
And again,
like
I don't want to get
ceiling
bogged down in the
systems and
pool. We're not gonna
HVAC. It's
solve
water
that
under the
issue
bridge.
today.
I just
We'll
thought it
move
was a
on.
bigger number.
What's that?
I thought it was gonna be a much bigger number.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I did too.
Okay.
I'm
All right,
100%
happy
honest with you
what
there.
you're doing.
But
Enough.
again, how does that pool function for, our swim team? How does it function for the FIAD department and things like that? That's some conversation that should happen
Well,
as well.
and swim team already lost a day of practice, because they had to delay because of the filtration already this year, so who knows?
Yeah, so when
That
we
could
filled that
happen.
pool up again, we had issues with the filtration system that pumped all the diatomaceous earth into the pool. So that was exciting.
Yeah.
So we weren't ready for the swim team. And then the ECC, obviously, not too old of a building, 95. There's 2 roof sections here, 95. If we do the math, we know we're beyond life expectancy of the roofs. The roofing consultant that the district's been working with, that's who Casey and Mark have been working with. He's really pushing me. He's like, we gotta do the ECC. That roof is getting really bad. There's a lot of You know, we had them just this spring where we had water infiltrating into the bathrooms and some offices, and we make the repairs, but we know that this one's coming, this one needs to be done. So you'll see roofing up there. The mechanicals, we did replace one of the rooftop units this summer. There's 3 more, again, original equipment to the building. And then the bottom one is kind of funny to have up there, but we literally have the bus drivers located in an area where there's electrical panels, and that really doesn't meet code. So again, we're not talking big ticket items, but it was a big ticket item depending upon how we address it, so I threw it up there.
Does the acreage of the site size, it's combined with FPMS, does that include the,
The
thank you,
Luxembourg Garden
Luxembourg
area?
Gardens
Yeah.
area, thank you.
Yeah. Still at 1.69, right? But again, it's roofing and mechanicals. And then there's other stuff. You could walk right outside and see some of the other issues. Walk up the sidewalk up here, you'll see concrete failing, the curbing's going away, you know? There's some grading issues. Groundskeepers recently filled some holes. I don't know how the holes were there, but I twisted an ankle in them. So there's some grading issues. You'll see water ponding around the site. So those are some of the smaller issues that you might find. So to summarize all this, here's what it really looks like, okay? You'll see the estimated costs. Again, I use estimated, right? These are the estimated costs at each individual building, totaling it up to just under $97 million. Does everybody remember what the asterisks for?
It's only for the next year.
What's that?
It's not, it's.
That's 24, 25
Yeah.
number.
Thank you. Just want to make sure it's sunk in.
Before we go further with this, Mr. Cromie, what do we spend budget-wise per year?
It's on the next page.
Oh, thank you.
Andrew's looking ahead.
I looked
Come on.
ahead.
We know you peaked, Mike.
I didn't actually. I always listen to the directions.
You want to see it on the screen?
I don't care if you're gonna get to it.
There you go.
Perfectly happy
Faded
to
that
bring
in.
it.
So it'd take approximately 80 years, doing that $1.2 million a year at today's dollars.
$24, $25. Asterisks.
So we're right there. I mean, we're right in line with where we thought we would be.
Great.
But I think it's important, well, we'll let Mitch is gonna talk about this, because I needed clarification of my own, why we had a high and low range, and Mitch did a phenomenal job of explaining it to me, so we'll turn that over to him.
Yeah, so when we have the estimated cost, so we did use in-house historical data that we priced a lot of the options up with. We also use some local contractors that have done work in some of your buildings. But with calling someone up, it is an estimate, so you could get a number, so we swayed it 7.5% each way. So if you had them come up to do something, it could be slightly less than what we plugged with historical data or slightly more. And then what also fluctuates too is we took larger proportions of areas, let's say for concrete or asphalt, for example. If you had to call somebody and you needed immediate need for a couple slabs of concrete that heaved, the efficiency isn't going to be the same price what we carried, or let's say you had a boiler go overnight in the winter. What we had priced as a lump sum for replacing that piece of unit might be more expensive when you have to call somebody overnight to get them there. So there is some fluctuation in these estimated averages we're carrying.
So if you, for example, let's just say we said, let's do all the concrete in the district. We're probably gonna get better competitive bids on that versus just doing one building, right? I don't think we would do that, but that's an example. Like those bids would probably be falling more into that low range. Whereas kind of pricing them out as we are right now, then that kind of falls into the estimated range. But if I'm replacing things on an emergent basis, that's probably gonna fall into the high range. If we actually tallied this and tracked that as we knock some of these off of the list. And I'll be honest, like some of these, we do have projected fees and things if we were gonna use engineers or if we were gonna use consultants or project management firms. Some of these little projects on the list, like I will tackle those on my own, but the estimated number is a good number to work off of. So how's this all work? Besides doing it over 80 years. I don't really fret about this. I had a very, like half the cost at a district, half the size, right? So we work through some of those challenges, like, we have to figure that out. I don't personally fret. I do wake up in the middle of the night and think about things. I do think about that question, what's gonna close the school when I make my decisions, right? But I'm gonna work within the B&G operating budget, which you'll hear a little bit more about that in the following presentation. We're gonna work within the CIP budget to address the highest, most emergent needs. So far, my experience with our leadership team is we always have like really good, practical, and honest conversations about things, and that not just always about curriculum or whatever, it's also about buildings and grounds. So I know that I have good people around me to help guide me as well, or I can guide them as well. So that's how I plan to move forward. And again, like I said earlier, we'll continue to assess, reassess, update the plan annually, maybe twice a year, and move forward with trying to do what we can based on maybe bigger conversations of how to address these. So happy to take questions. Holly's gonna answer them all.
And I guess I just wanted to also kind of take a step back. So the numbers that Andy gave you are the actual numbers of issues we did find on the jobs or on the sites. It's not always an all or nothing. So for example, a roof, if it's on some of the buildings, it was 20,000 square feet. It's already exceeded its life expectancy. So we assumed at some point you're gonna replace that whole roof. If there's only a few roof leaks, then you can kind of take those areas and replace them. So it isn't on every line item an all or nothing. The number of line items are actual issues, but it's not an all or nothing on every single one of those, which is kind of how he can work in getting some of those items within his budget every year.
Debbie, I don't know if you needed it. ECC was 30 issues. Were you gonna ask?
No, I was gonna wait.
30 at ECC, 187 at the high school, 22 at Forest Park. We got you on Ben Franklin, correct? Yes.
But they're not all equal. I'm sure there's a range of cost.
They are, yeah, it's because a lot of it, so the way that, I didn't feel like this was important, but that's a great question. So the way CD Smith kind of broke it up was, some of it's by square footage, that's a very easy number to work off of. Some of it's unit cost. There's door issues. So yeah, we might have, I'm making this up now, don't hold me to this, but let's say we have, 5 exterior doors at Ben Franklin. Yeah, so like now we know what Ben Franklin's gonna be, but if we might have 10 at Southwood Glen, so obviously there's gonna be a different number there. I mean, literally the number might double. Does that answer, is that to your point?
No, I'm just saying that the project numbers aren't always comparable, so it's a good measure, but it's not ideal.
Come on, what else you guys got?
I have a quick question. I know one of your subcategories, it doesn't really address school safety. I mean, are we pretty much at the top as far as safe buildings in case of active shooters, tornadoes, things like that?
Yeah, that's really good, Mary. So you guys have one of the best safety plans in probably the state of Wisconsin. Like, I really gotta commend the people that worked on that. But no, there's things in there on safety, like cameras and proximity access, which you'll hear a little bit about that in the upcoming presentation. But those are in there. But again, we didn't really pull safety out as a subcategory like what you're talking about. But there are safety issues. I mean, doors alone are a safety issue. If we have a door that's rusting out or the jamb is rusting out and it's not closing tightly, that's a safety issue.
All of my questions are existential and can therefore wait.
All right, let's bring Mark up.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You use the clicker there, Mark?
That is not my
Oh, very good.
Go your way.
I'll just start by announcing that when I started at Robinwood, it was only 6 years old. I'm a graduate, a product of Franklin Schools. I graduated in '86, so I'm happy to be back.
Cool.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about projections. As the superintendent indicated, there's a lot of data behind what I'm going to present. I'm not going into the background, the methodology, but there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of information that I could share. After I left Franklin Schools, I went on to become an urban planner. That's how I started my career. That's how I practice. Half of my work is working with municipalities on growth plans and land development. I spend the other half working with school districts. on projecting enrollment. And the method we use is based a lot on expected development and expected demographic change within the community. There's a lot more detail and methodology. The one thing I can say to you is that the last thing I do is look at the last 10 to 15 years and draw a straight line forward when projecting enrollment. What we did do is break the district into 57 different neighborhoods and arrived at a demographic profile of students and housing units in each neighborhood today, and then projected that forward. And with that methodology, we're able to make projections for each of your schools based on detailed understanding of subdivisions and other developments and turnover in each of those 57 different neighborhoods. Our projection period goes out to 2040, so we're going out 17, 18 years in our projections, but we have interim projections, as you'll see as well. We did the methodology both by doing a lot of number crunching, but a lot of talking. We had an extensive interview and back and forth with City Franklin planning staff to understand plans and expectations, new developments, what's likely, what's not likely, and when. We supplemented that with talking with developers, the folks that are doing the subdivisions, doing the apartment developments in the community, to understand from their perspective, what they're going to be doing this year, next year, and what they see in the pipeline. What do interest rates really mean? How is that changing from last year to this, and so forth? So more on the methodology later, especially if you have questions.
Of the 57 or 53, I forget what you said, neighborhoods, how many of those are current and how many of those are not there yet?
We basically, every square inch of the district falls in one neighborhood. So some of the neighborhoods are fully built out, and we wouldn't expect, change in housing units. Some are fully built out, and we have redevelopment happening, things replacing older things. Some of them, especially in the southwest part of the district, are, farmland predominantly today that we, so it really depends. And we tried to, when devising the neighborhood, tried to make the neighborhoods somewhat homogeneous. It helps us with projections going forward to say, hey, this older neighborhood, in Mission Hills, where I grew up, draw a boundary around that and distinguish that from a neighborhood, adjacent that might be largely cornfield yet today. So we start off by understanding the profile of the district today, but then we move on to projecting housing unit growth within each of those 57 different neighborhoods. And basically speaking, we're projecting significant housing unit growth in your district. Over the last few years, there's been about 200 new housing units built of all types within your district. We'd expect a similar pace over the next 10 to 15 years based on a variety of factors. And we'd expect most of that growth, or much of that growth, to occur within the 2020s. Why do we expect it that soon? First of all, I'm sure you read about it, heard about it. We have fewer housing units being built than households being formed. We have a shortage of housing in our region, in our state, in our country. And there are efforts to address that housing shortage currently going on. You're also, in Franklin, fairly well poised to accommodate additional housing unit growth. There's a lot of land still available for development. A lot of land being bought and sold for development. Fairly limited constraints on utility service compared to some of the other communities I work with, and the city has plans to open up some new areas for development with sewer and water system expansions. We've got demands from our two largest generations at peak here in the 2020s. The baby boomers, which isn't really going to be affecting things directly here, but it will be affecting things indirectly. We've got baby boomers that are, in particular over the next 10 to 15 years, going to be relocating from their current homes and freeing those homes up for new households in the community. It's probably a lot of it. 45% of the houses built in Franklin were built in the 1990s or the 2000s. And those are the houses that we'd expect over the next 10 to 15 years to be turning over to new families, new generations taking over those houses that are approaching 30 to 40 years over that projection period. So baby boomers, you know, it matters how we see and movement in the community. We also have the largest generation, the millennials, that are predominantly in their 30s right now. And so they're in sort of their peak child bearing years. And we're seeing birth rates go up in Franklin and elsewhere as a result of that. We've got interest among developers. It's not just a municipality preparing a plan and hoping things will happen. We've got developers pushing the municipality, sometimes in directions that they're not, the city isn't always comfortable with, but there's developer interest happening here for sure. Why do we have that interest? Well, we've got job growth in the community, both locally in Franklin, in the industrial park, and elsewhere, and regionally, you know, Milwaukee Regional Medical Center, other places that are very close to you, and you're well connected with the interstate and highway system. And it's not to be overlooked is you're a school district of choice. It was mentioned real early here in tonight's meeting. People come here for the schools. And so those combinations of factors above, combined with great schools, really lead us to believe that you're going to see a lot of housing units built over the next 10 years in particular. It's not always going to be in this, it's not going to be equally distributed among all your attendance areas. And in fact, the largest attendance area, if you looked at your map, is the Country Dale attendance area. And that's also the area that has the largest amount of available land for new development, particularly single-family housing development. So we actually project that of all the housing units that we'd expect over the 2020s and 30s, that more than half of that's going to be in the current Country View attendance area. So you'll see that, how that plays out when we translate that into enrollment. I have this slide up, and it's important, and new housing unit growth is important for enrollment, especially new single-family housing development. But I can't emphasize enough that most of the housing units that are going to be on the ground in 2040 are already here. So what happens in them is extremely important. So the last thing I want you to take away is, you know, Roffer says we're going to have 100 new housing units. How many students per housing unit? Well, in your community, it's about 0.7. Oh, we're going to get 70 new students in our district. That unfortunately ignores what happens in the vast majority of housing units that are already here. And that's a really big part of our equation, not just housing unit growth. So how does that equation work out? We're projecting enrollment. This is a 4K through 12 enrollment projection you see on screen right now. We're projecting between now and 2040 an increase of over 700 students in your district. You want to parse that off by a year. That's about 40 additional students each year over the next 17 or so. Our assumptions are built into our methodology. We are assuming private schooling, open enrollment out, and homeschooling remaining at constant rates over our projection period. We didn't see anything in the data or in private school enrollment, homeschooling, that would suggest otherwise for us. Our projections do include resident enrollment, in other words, folks that live in your district, plus a constant number of Franklin Public School residents attending your school via open enrollment. So the projections we have include both. But if you want to look at it just in terms of resident enrollment, we're projecting 721 more resident students within your district. This is a big table. There's a couple of other slides with similar information on it. I'll just point to a few things on this slide to get you acclimated to it. First off, as I mentioned earlier, it includes a projection for each of the schools. for the elementary schools, that's based on current attendance areas. So our neighborhoods are accumulated by attendance area to come up with the projection for that school. We have, in the middle of the chart, you see our projections. We have 5 different projection periods, our first being the 2024-25 school year, then 2027, then 2030, 2035, and 2040. So that's the projection information in the middle. The magic really happens when you compare the projections to the capacity of each school. We derive that from the district and from PRA capacity range. That's in the final column of the table. And then you see some of the colors, and the colors represent those places where capacity issues without any changes will emerge in your district over the next 17-year period. The yellow represents that the projected total enrollment is above the targeted capacity of the school, but below the maximum capacity of the school. And the red, or I guess it shows as pink, indicates where a projected enrollment that we put together exceeds the maximum rated capacity of that school building. So you see the high school is currently operating just above the targeted capacity range at total enrollment June 2023, and we'd expect that to continue going forward. I'm going to talk about those red numbers on the next slide. So given the current attendance areas and all the housing unit growth we're projecting at Country Dale, we're projecting capacity issues there before 2030. That's if you do nothing between now and 2030. Don't change attendance areas, don't build schools, don't expand capacity in any way. And that school would continue to accelerate in enrollment growth as those cornfields in its large attendance area continue to fill with subdivisions and other housing development over that period. So you see a gaudy number as you look to 2040, really, something that won't happen. I'm sure you all will address that before it does happen, but it shows the significance of the issue in addition to those numbers that were shared to you about projects that need to happen there, regardless. If you look at all the schools, all the other elementary schools, we're projecting them with current attendance areas to remain below their capacity. And some schools, like Pleasant View, having excess capacity, but this assumes you do nothing to rearrange attendance areas or affect capacity at the schools. If you wanted to look at all the elementary schools combined, you can see that number 2585 at the bottom. That's our projected 4K through 5 enrollment for the year 2040. And that's when the total combined enrollment is projected to exceed the total combined targeted capacity of the elementary schools. Quickly, in the middle school, we're projecting enrollment growth there, but it's built to accommodate that, well through 2040. So that's obviously good news for y'all. Jumping to the high school, this chart shows projected enrollment to capacity a little bit differently via a chart. The gray box represents the targeted capacity, and the orange area represents the range between targeted and maximum capacity. And then the black line represents our projected resident enrollment. And then if you assume that constant open enrollment that's the red dashed line. So you can see with that, the school is projected to operate just above targeted capacity for a number of years. You're going to be graduating, like a lot of districts, from some fairly big classes over the next few years. But as we see some of that elementary growth eventually trickling up into the high school, our projection is that the high school will grow into that targeted to maximum capacity range further. Again, in review, we're projecting an additional 700 plus or minus students. I can guarantee you one thing about these projections is that they will be wrong. So, but that is the range that we're projecting. We're assuming, continued healthy economy with some, bumps in the road. If we get a 2007, 2008 recession, that number might not be our 2040 number. It might become our 2045 number. But the direction, I think, is clear to us. You can see how it's broken down by elementary, middle, and high. We do have more grades in the elementary group, so that's one reason for the bump there. But it's also driven by housing unit growth in particular. And this stands to reason. When you have new housing units built, you rarely have folks moving in with a 6th grader and a 9th grader. When you do, they're usually moving from one part of the district to the other, not from somewhere else entirely to the district. When we have new housing units built, we typically have folks coming with no kids yet, or little kids that are not in school or barely in school. So that's why you see those numbers kind of tilted to the elementaries. And the other thing we had that we need to factor in, and we have, is that we had a big bubble of housing units built around 2000 in Franklin. Mm-hmm. And those kids are now in high school or starting to graduate from high school. So those 6 through 8, 9 through 12 numbers kind of take a little bit of a hit over the next few years and then have to kind of come back from that. And then the final point is that, and maybe test is the wrong, is a very gentle word, but the projected enrollment, certainly begins to test your capacities at your schools, at the elementary, and then later at the high school level.
Andrew, go ahead.
I'm just curious, especially looking at the graph for the high school on slide 42, if you can comment on the significance of working outside the target capacity of a school in terms of our ability to deliver excellent instruction.
I would say that's probably a question for either the architecture team or education team, and not me.
This was defined by someone other than you, I take it? Okay,
yes.
Yeah.
Let me move one row up.
Welcome to the front row.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Quick reintroduction. I'm Nick Kent from PRA. Excellent question. So just a brief note on what target capacity is versus maximum capacity. And some of you have heard this spiel from me in the past, but when we calculate the capacity of a building, we first calculate what's a theoretical maximum capacity. And that theoretical maximum is if we could fill up every available seat in every section perfectly in a school. It would be the perfect schedule, right? Every single seat was filled for every period of the day. We know that's not real, right? In terms of a high school setting, there are so many moving parts, right? There's schedule things, there are different class sizes, there are different curricula that change from year to year. So when we calculate that theoretical maximum, which is primarily driven by number of kids that we can put in any given teaching station, times how many of those teaching stations we have in the building, a national standard is to back down to 80% of that maximum capacity to get to a target capacity. And the intention of that 80% utilization rate is to anticipate inefficiencies in scheduling, natural fluctuations in number of kids coming through, what course demand may exist within any given year. So from my standpoint, looking as a facility planner, when I see the enrollment numbers start to nudge up above target and towards maximum, it's not automatically reason for concern. It's something we should be aware of and something we should watch and make sure we have the right diversity of the right types of spaces, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're eating into the quality of education.
Thank you.
To go along with that, a lot of things seem to be changing at the high school. Kids are, as they get a little older, are not at school all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly more now than 5 years ago. 17 years from now, I'm guessing that's going to continue.
Right.
Does that? Are you seeing those changes, or are you?
Yes. Simple answer is yes. And in fact, Mark and I had a conversation earlier today in another school in our area that is nearly 100 years old. And there's a logical question, you know, this facilities, not even 100 years ago, maybe facilities 20 years ago may have held or supported many more students than the capacity that we're calculating today. And yes, that is a reflection of it. How are we using those spaces is changing. So when we look at the capacity, the numbers that are represented here tonight, it's a reflection of how Franklin High School is organized today and what spaces we have today and how we use those spaces. If we start changing how the high school, for whatever reason, how the high school or any of these buildings is used, like students may have more youth apprenticeships, right? And they're not physically on campus anymore. That would potentially materially affect the capacity of that building.
For Mark, there's talk recently of a 1,000-unit apartments going in 76 in Rawson. How does something like that affect the numbers versus these single-family homes?
Fractionally. Most, when we have data, you know, new apartments that have been built recently in Franklin, and we have student address data, so we can correlate the two so we know how many students are coming out of each apartment complex and each single-family subdivision that has been built. On average, each new apartment unit generates 0.05 students for your district. So, and if you want to look at it in a more logical way, you need 20 new apartment units for one new student. And that's fairly typical new housing. It's being built for Gen Zers, certain cases for baby boomers, empty nesters, and less so for families. Single family housing in your community generates between, in the first 10 to 15 years of its life, generates between 0.7 and 0.8 kids per housing unit. So a significant degree more. And by the way, existing housing units, when they turn over in Franklin, we've done this in 40 different districts over the last 10 years in the state, generates about the highest rate of kids that I've seen in those 40 districts. About, here's my wonky numbers, 0.45 kids for each existing single-family home that's sold, which is a pretty big number in my experience.
Mark, I have a question too. When factoring in from the apartment standpoint, would we take in, I'm not doing any of the work, but would you take into account the value that those apartments are going to be priced at as well in figuring out students? I would imagine those apartments that they're talking about on Rawson, those are probably going for $2,500 a month, right? Versus a typical apartment that a family might move into. So would that have any bearing on that or no?
Yeah, well, most new apartments being built are not cheap. Most of them are probably more than your monthly mortgage payment. It's very rare that we have quote unquote affordable housing units being built either by some government subsidy, tax credit program being the most common, and that'll get rents down closer to $1,000 or $1,500 for that same apartment. So it's very rare that we have rental apartments being built that are generating significant students, and I'm not aware of any of those pending complexes that'll do so.
Linda, please.
Are you seeing any trends in kids going online and not going to a school building? More parent households choosing something different?
You might be able to comment on that generally. We did look at that trend in Franklin, and obviously there was a 2020 bump, but we've seen a lot of districts, including Franklin, sort of return back to the pre-pandemic norm in that regard.
Yeah, I think in general, yes, there is some increase in number of students that have gone in other directions, not necessarily just online, but just in other directions in our traditional public school systems. But Materially, no, it has not had a huge impact on what we're seeing in general across our state. It's recordable, but it's not a significant impact.
Agreed.
Did you
So,
ever look at college level, or how much of college is going online versus showing up at the university? Is there more? You don't,
you really
don't
couldn't
work
speak
in
to
that
that.
world?
Doesn't really apply to our work.
Well,
here.
No.
Well, I might push down as, as people get comfortable with that.
Only note on that, because we do some work in the university level. It's a very turbulent world right now. What college is, what it will be, it's a very wildly moving target right now.
Coming our way.
Maybe.
Anybody else?
Your work is very interesting, I think.
thank you.
No other questions from Mark? All right.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet all you.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's only a couple things to click through.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. So kind of to wrap up, I mean, obviously, if we have any other questions, wonderings, clarity tonight, we have people in the room that can maybe help answer some of those. I know, like we front-loaded with, it's a lot of information, and that's why we're coming back around it in a number of weeks with opportunities to send questions our way or other clarities that we can offer. So we can bring that back as part of the presentation and discussion, even more so on September 27th.
One question. So
Mhm.
is this is all of the information we'll have is this packet? Or can we flip through your project list? Kind of
So I think the next step, the big piece is doing the facility tours, like we talked about, it's one-dimensional and it's not a plethora binder of papers. It's the summarization of that. So doing the tours of the buildings can be discussions to talk about like what do these projects look like? Literally, what do they look like? What is costing on that? As far as bringing all of those sheets that CD Smith has brought, like done all the work on, that wasn't part of the plan, no.
One thing I was surprised to not hear any commentary on was the ability of our current athletic facilities. Where is that hiding out in all of this?
It's in there, yeah.
Where?
It's in the site, the exterior improvement, or exterior issues.
So
And there's a subcategory.
I think what you're addressing, Angie, is the community talk about a field house and things like that.
Correct.
So tonight's this is the exact state we're in today.
Okay.
So if you've noticed, there's been no like recommendations to do this or to do that. It's purely this is where we are today. If we fixed everything that's broken today or in process of not working anymore, this is what it would cost to fix today. Here's our projected enrollment.
Okay.
But again, nothing done about what we do with that projected enrollment or this and that. It's today's state only.
That was actually the only question that I can formulate tonight is if, what would you know what I mean? Like if money was no option, if we could wave a magic wand right now, is there a clear plan of how to address all these issues, or is it?
Well, I think one of the things one of the things that we need to think about over the next month is what are the guiding principles that we want as a district that the board wants to give to the administration to, for instance, Countrydale, we have to figure out if it's worth fixing, right? I mean, we have land, we have 200 acres of land. Is the $12 million that we would need to spend on Countrydale worthwhile to spend on Countrydale, or are we better off building a new building, which might cost 15 million or 20 million, but what would that 12 million dollars get us at Countrydale? Does that give us 10 more years? Or, it needs to be a bigger building, it was built in 1953, and I'm just using that as an example. I'm not suggesting we do anything.
That was what I was looking
But
at.
what,
I can add some things to that, Ann. So first of all, there's no definitive plan of how to move forward from here. Have many ideas been kicked around when we meet with PRA and CD Smith? Absolutely, in thinking broad strokes. I know you've seen the pictures, and Annalee talked about it in one of her Friday updates. We took principals out to Madison and we took a look at schools, and we went up to Germantown and took a look at schools. So some of it is identifying, like, what would the ultimate elementary school look like? And then part of PRA's job is gonna be, well, here's the 5 you have. How would you even make that with the 5 you have? Or what could you even do to that? So those are all ideas right now that, at this point, are just ideas. None of them have been fully vetted, but we certainly have talked about things, but there's no definitive plan. That part of tonight is like, let's figure out exactly where we are today. And then that's part of the guiding principle. If you think back to the middle school, right? It was repair the middle school, and all of a sudden you ended up with a new one. Well, why? Because ultimately repairing it and making it educationally sound cost X, and building new cost Y, and X and Y were right next to each other. So logically, why wouldn't you do that? Same like, at some point you buy a new car because repairing your car and the age of it doesn't make sense anymore. So it's time to get a new one. And sometimes it makes sense to fix it because it's still very serviceable.
So our next meeting, we will be trying to form some guiding principles, having our questions answered, and determining next steps.
Starting to have those discussions, yeah. So like the guiding principles will bring something forward that we would suggest that's culmination of kind of, not culmination, but where we're at.
Sure.
With the work that Andy's talking about that we're doing with.
So my question is going to be, well, in order for me to sort of frame my questions and think about what for me would be a guiding principle, are our next steps, like, is the next step going to be sending y'all back to the drawing board to come up with options or taking a look at options? Where do you envision in your master plan of sequencing this out our next step to be, so that I can think about what questions I need to be asking to get us there?
Sure, I think, a lot of it, the guiding principles are something that we'll bring forward thinking about, like I prefaced in the front. So when we're looking at those elementary school learning environments, what is it that we want all of our students to have that is similar? Because if you're gonna renovate Countrydale versus build new, if we have a brand new school and we have some kids still attending Robinwood, it's gonna be a very different learning environment, and it's going to affect what learning looks like. So we need to also identify, and that's what we'd bring forward on the 27th, is those guiding principles, deciding like, this is what we want all of our students to experience layered with that teaching and learning world. So it's a layer to it. And then the discussion starts to be, I think, like, as we've talked about, as we start looking at this is, so Countrydale, like Mike said, is at that $11-12 million mark. What does that look like to start renovating? Thinking back to the Forest Park conversation, right? But then you also have Robinwood there. Okay, so like the conversation where I know what you're saying you want, like, what is the exact thing on that day? That's a difficult answer to give because every decision and discussion we have along the way will formulate that. So I think that night would be,
come prepared.
here's what the team thinks is what we want our kids to experience learning, especially in elementary schools across multiple buildings. Can we agree on that as a board? Is there anything else we want to add to that? So that would be a part of that discussion. On the 27th, we may decide you need more information on the pool or other things like that. Okay, so then we bring that forth. And then you start to talk about like, what are the other bigger things we want, like the athletic fields at the high school. Like we're just, as Andy said, well, we're looking at the current state, so then we need to start talking about, here's the difficulties we know are ahead. Countrydale's gonna exceed capacity, high school's gonna dance on that line and not be comfortable. But on top of it, we have these sports facilities we maybe wanna add, and we have Robinwood issues that are also going on. It just starts to layer and compound, like what are the things that really matter, because you saw a big price tag at the end. So also if that's not something we're going to do over 80 years in a $1.2 million operating budget, then what are the things that are necessary pieces? What are the things that we know our community potentially wants? And then we start to talk about what are those questions, if we're gonna go that direction, that we wanna ask the community to know what would be supported.
Okay.
Because there's a variety of ways it could go. It's not a clear linear path to get there. That's the complexity of the problem. I mean.
I think
we had talked about, especially the swimming pool, the pool at the high school. I think we talked about that. Is it worth fixing it or is it worth replacing it? And I think we had some numbers thrown out. Maybe I don't remember exactly, but 4 or 5 million or 3 million or 2 million, something like that for a new pool. But fixing this old pool was something like half the price or 40% of the price. So if we can get that number too, because I know that pool has been an issue for our kids, and sports being a high achieving, it's in the high school. If we can get that number for the
Yeah, we can. You're several steps down
Yeah,
the
you're
road
too
already,
far.
Maxine. Yeah, like that's not even in tonight's discussion. The numbers that you saw tonight were to take the building and repair it, so when you walked in, it looked exactly like it did today, but all the doors function
Yeah.
and all the windows function. Nothing about making that pool WIA compliant or making sure it doesn't leak 10 years from now. That's like fixing the patch so it doesn't leak tomorrow. So all of those things come further down the road of this investigation. So certainly when it came time to decide on the pool, or if anything's going to be done, yes, there's going to be multiple options to say, this is to fix it today. This is to make it WIA compliant but not change the walls. This would be building a new one and everything that falls in between. So that's not for tonight. That's not even for the 27th.
Okay, good.
So can I then rephrase my question? Maybe is that the category 1, which needs immediate attention, I think maybe as a board we need options. Okay, if you want to fix this, for example, Countrydale in a category 1, roof is falling apart, blah blah blah, all this stuff. This is category 1. This is the price tag to fix it, but is it a better investment for the same category 1 rather than fixing it, replacing it, or something like that, or making it a new one?
So what I'm
maybe-
hearing is that at our next meeting, we will be talking about sort of identifying those principles. If we all agree that it's within a ballpark we're not going to be even deciding that next time. We're going to be talking about our sort of
Plan on facilities being
Principles.
brought to us multiple times over the course of the next 6 months.
I hope what we ultimately want is a 10-year plan for facilities and how we're going to go about financing a 10-year plan for facilities. Realizing that we may not have $100 million to spend, and we may have to prioritize. And I hope that's what we want to do, is make a plan for the future, and figure out how we get from here to that future. Linda, please.
Yeah, I've been on the board 15 years, and we've seen various projects being done. I think the pool was made WIA compliant when we dug out
Yes.
we dug out that pool to make it, and now you're saying it's not? It just blows my mind about some of the stuff I hear. Part of it is how we got here. These are big numbers. These are big numbers, and we pride ourselves in taking care of our facilities. So I think I do need more information than this high level. I want to see some of these, at least, how old is this stuff? Is it really old? Is that why these numbers are big? These categories are a little bit too broad for me to get my head around. How do we get here? Because we've done a good job of maintaining stuff. So these numbers are really big numbers, unexpected numbers, and you knew you were going to surprise us with that, obviously. But I need to understand why they are. Is it because you're really looking at every single thing? Or is this stuff really old? Or what's the rationale?
But just to push back, does it matter how we got here? If this is where we are? I mean,
Well, I don't want to do it again.
Absolutely, I don't want to do it again.
So how did we get to know how we got here?
Okay.
What did we miss? Where did we miss the boat?
So I'll give one explanation. One explanation is some of our buildings are approximately 30 years old, right? A lot of our systems, roofing and mechanicals, their life expectancy is 30 years old. So if you do a great job of maintaining them, at some point, that entire building, all of those systems are coming due in a smaller window of time, right? And we have a couple of buildings that sit within that wheelhouse alone. And so typically what many districts see when they have a building that reaches that 30-year range, all of a sudden they have a huge capital need at that building because a lot of things come due. Because we can patch that roof for lots of years before you even have to address fixing it. And a lot of those mechanical systems, again, they're designed to last that long, and if you really maintain them very well, they do. They're like anything that we own at home. If we maintain it very well, we can really get it a long period of time. But at some point it comes due, and if we do really well on a lot of them, they're all coming due at the same time. And so we have a couple of facilities like Ben Franklin and South Glen that fit that mold. There's just a lot that comes due at that time. Then you have aging facilities. We have Robinwood and Countrydale that are 60 years or close to 60-plus years old, right? And buildings just don't last that long. So now we're looking at things like foundation work that's gonna have to be done. And like you mentioned, the brickwork, or a window sill outside that just doesn't get done for a little while because we have other projects. Well, now water from rain and snow is all leaking behind that. And now that wall project or that windowsill that might have been a small thing becomes a big thing, because now all the structure behind it is now added to that particular project. Same with concrete and asphalt, right? If you don't seal it and it has cracks in it, water gets in it, and winter it freezes and thaws and freezes and thaws, and now that becomes a problem. And then other things are, as soon as you touch a certain amount of the building and start repairing it, all these ADA pieces come into play that have nothing to do with what you're intending to fix, but because we've touched a certain amount of the building, now we just, all these ADA things have to go in to that particular component of it. So I guess the question I would ask, and like, if we show everybody the sheets, which is totally fine.
You have the information.
Right, but if you start piecing through it, I don't know what, I'm gonna know more than PRA or CD Smith versus anybody else up here to say, to question that and go, well, that's wrong. Or that number's not right. I talked to the roofing guy over here and he can do my roof for 12 grand. So like, that's the part I don't.
That's not my intent.
I think the question I have is if we spend $100 million over the next 10 years, and I mean, obviously we get it, it would have to be financed. If we spend $100 million, does that last? Are we asking for another $100 million in today's dollars?
In 30 years.
10 years from now or 30 years from now? Because if it's, or is it 20 years from now,
Somewhere
right?
in
That's the,
between.
right, in 2040, are we asking for $100 million in today's dollars again, or are we asking for it in 2050?
Or do we find a number each year that takes care of things so that we never get the humps that we're facing now?
Well, and.
Are there plans that we
right,
know
is there
how
more
stuff
of a ma-
ages?
Is there more of a maintenance, right, is there
Right.
more of a
We have-
maintenance? If we spent 2 million instead of 1.2 million every year, maybe we can do that and maybe we can't. But if we spend 2 million a year rather than 1.2 million, does that help us or doesn't it, right? That's the question for, and obviously we're not gonna answer those questions tonight. But those, I think we wanna make a long-term, Linda's talking about a long-term plan. I think we're all talking about a long-term plan.
I mean, the age of our buildings in and of itself is never the end of the story, you know? A building can be 100 years old and still be functional, right? It can be. And I think we are expecting these buildings to last. I mean, weren't we? We were putting money in.
Well, that sounds like a guiding principle. How long is long enough to say we expect a building to work for us? I don't know.
Well, and kind of to Linda's point, the us in 2040, you don't want the us in 2040 to be looking back and saying, what did those idiots do or not do in 2023? Like you're saying, what didn't the people do 20 years ago? So I guess, that's.
I think you're gonna have to look at it in a couple of facets. So each of the buildings in there has some work that needs to be done, right? So you're gonna weigh that exact work with, what does that educational improvement component look like? That's gonna give you a number for each building, and then you're gonna say, well, that building versus new is gonna cost this. You're gonna weigh that out, but then you're gonna have to take that in an aggregate form as well and say, well, now all 7 of these buildings, or if we add the ECC in there, all 8 of these buildings have just this repair cost. Then we have this educational improvement component to it. What does that all look like together? And then it's gonna be horse trading, right? Because it's probably not all getting done. So now, what are we gonna be able to do here? Or what are we gonna be able to do here? What are we gonna forgo? What really is gonna last? And then you're gonna weigh some of those components individually, and you're gonna weigh them then against the aggregate too. So some of it's gonna come out to, it's $10 million to fix just today. Educational component is $15 million, it's 25. A new elementary is gonna cost, they'll figure it out, X, Y, and Z, and you're gonna do the same thing you do with the middle school. And then you're gonna do that with each elementary school. And then you're gonna say, but altogether, that's gonna cost this, so now what are we gonna do? And can we get some of that done with less work here, even though it's not exact to what Anna Lee was saying with maybe a new school here, but can we get pretty close with some less work over here? That's where it's the hard decision, there's no doubt about, there's no way around, it's a really hard decision, right? And then you look at the Countrydale component of students going in there, and if nothing is done, an 840 student elementary is gigantic and probably not great for kids. So something's gonna have to be done there as well. None of it's easy. Like, you're looking at a long, hard road to hoe here. And, but that's okay. That's part of our job, is giving you the solutions that are gonna help.
But I think it's
make that
recognizing
palatable.
where that dollar amount is right now. So to your point, Linda, like if we put more in that budget, instead of 1.2, we say it's gonna be 2. Where are we pulling that from? And then how many years out is that yet? And what does get fixed in that time, and what potentially ages and gets worse in that time? So sometimes, like, it's the stopgap now to say, is this maintainable for the next 10 years if we don't make some different decisions, and what do those need to be? Right now, it's just looking at, this is what our current dollar amount is. And if we said we wanted to put $4 million into that budget for buildings and grounds every year, where is that coming from? Because I'm also hearing we should retain and pay the best teachers to stay here. So are we pulling from there? Because that's our biggest bucket of money. Andy went through that during our annual meeting. So it's a very difficult discussion, right? And I prefer to keep looking forward. Like, we're not gonna be able to answer all the questions of why things were before. I think some of it's obvious, to the aging of buildings, some of those things that just come around cyclically that we have to manage. But the difficult part's going to be, how do we move forward from where we're at currently? What's realistic in our current budget that we know that we could maybe allocate more, and is that really gonna get us to what our desired state is from where we are now? And how long are we willing to chip away at that versus make some harder decisions to get there sooner?
Sounds like what we should have done is build one new building every 10 years over the last 60 years. So they all age differently.
Well, there was additions, and there was a lot of additions in that time.
Fair.
There wasn't.
I'm just kidding, Linda.
I know,
It's
it's
hard
good
when
that
things
I like
come due
the-
at the
your-
same
I like
time.
your, tours. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead. We didn't get that far.
Sure.
I can't believe that this building's got $1.7 million. We just went through a 2-year redoing of this whole building.
It
Sounds
looks
like
different
It
inside.
sounds
but-
like we need to take tours and see what you're
Whole
talking
big
about.
Building. Are these,
Oh, speaking of facilities, we have some facility walkthrough tours dates that are up here on the screen. Darlene's gonna send out a doodle tomorrow. So doodle just allows you to check all of these, if all of them could work for you, 3 if they could work, and very quickly we can come up with 1 common or 2 common dates. If we have to do all 4 dates or at other times, we can do that too. But this was a good starting point where we knew it worked for many in our team and around the work schedules that we know of board members already. So that doodle will come out tomorrow. Sorry, go ahead.
Will we, on a tour date, will you see all buildings, or is it like Ben Franklin and Countrydale and Forest Park?
Sure,
are
so
one
it's
day,
gonna
like-
be, great question. Yep, the tour is set up to be 30 minutes in each elementary school and the high school, with a 30-minute debrief after and 10-minute drive time in between.
Can Mike drive us around on a bus?
I was just gonna ask.
I mean,
And
it
are we
might
get- are we getting
maybe,
lunch?
I
Are
mean,
we
it's
having
gonna,
lunch
we'll get lunch at the end, and then also the 8:30 start time might be difficult on the bus, but if we can do it, we will.
Right,
They
good.
might be on routes
That's
yet,
what I'm hoping for.
so that'll be our first priority, get the kids here and then get the bus out.
So it might be 1 date, it might be 2 dates.
Right, if we need to do
Um,
2 dates to get everybody through, the doodle will very quickly tell us
Yeah.
We still
what
have
those
stuff
dates
on our
are and what
agenda.
works.
Oh.
We'll accommodate everybody. If these 4 dates, they don't work, then we'll figure it out. What we really tried to pull in the thought behind this, so everything's always has dimensions behind it. I think we figured that out about how we all operate at this point. The start time, we're gonna start at schools where we know drop off is congested, buses are congested, so you can see that in action. So it's seeing the facilities, it's also seeing the operation of those facilities and the kids moving about. So we'll hit elementary schools early, we'll end at the high school. We won't tour Forest Park. I think we're pretty familiar with it. We're not touring the ECC, but glad they can walk around the ECC at any point where you want to see some of those pieces too. So yes, it's focused on the elementaries and the middles, or sorry, the high school.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to kind of what Linda said, we had stuck money into this building. One of the things when I teach the 08 license at MSOE, because we have to do a facilities component of that for DPI licensure, I love talking about if we paint the walls of a school and we make the floors shiny. When parents walk in, they think, wow, this school's in great shape. But we really don't know what's behind the wall or above the ceiling or on the roof, because we don't see that as, like, we walk in, this looks great in here, but I have no idea what's above here. I've never seen it. I have no idea. That was their job to figure that out, right? Or what's above the roof, but it looks great here. So, all of our buildings, when we walk in, like, there's lots of areas that look great, but I don't really know what's behind the wall personally. Andy does, and that's, his team takes care of that, but, so the visual part of it, the instant visual part of it isn't necessarily telling the story of what's actually happening to the facility, so.
Do we want to put all our questions somewhere ahead of time rather than have them all just in a big
We can
mix?
email them to Andy or I, and we'll accumulate them together.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yep.
All right.
And then will we see all the questions?
We will bring them back to the board meeting. Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
We're gonna avoid walking quorum and be cautious about how we do it before then. That's the only reason.
All right, let's move
Okay.
on. This was a
Can't
lot.
wait-
Thank you
Can't
very
wait for the
much.
doodle tomorrow.
The doodle? Yep.
But
Exciting.
this is
We've
a
got
lot of
more
work
on the
and
agenda.
Thank
Just
you all for
reminding
being
us.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's a lot of work put into that. Buildings and Grounds Annual Report, Mr. Daniels, please.
That presentation's in the queue, right?
Yep. I'll have it up in just a moment here.
So why he brings that up? I'm gonna steal 2 minutes of your time. So I think this really falls into place with the top of that page, right? So I've been doing this for 22 years, right? I've been in educational facilities, started out as a custodian, and then obviously I made my way all the way to here, which I believe is the top. This time of the year, 22 years of doing this, this is the time of the year that my inbox fills up. I get all the requests, trying to get teachers settled in, get secretaries settled in, get food service people settled in. And my day today started out just like that, right? Like all of a sudden we're getting hit up with all these things, right? So I thought it was just important to share with you that we got out into like 3 or 4 buildings. We started addressing some issues and really coming up with some solutions to problems that were real problems, right? So we literally made some decisions today around TVs that I know that we made the classroom a better place to learn. I know that we made that building a better place to learn. I know that during those discussions, which sometimes the teachers didn't want to hear, they were good discussions. Matter of fact, we laughed a lot today in those discussions. That happened literally from noon to till 2:30 with principals, with custodians, and with teachers. I know based on those conversations, even though they were tough conversations, that made us a better place to work, okay? And ultimately, that just kind of goes indirectly into the culture of the whole community, which is a part of a better community. So I wanted to share that because I felt like we need a little bit of some positive energy right now after some of that.
Good job.
So, all right. So obviously, you guys are accustomed to seeing this annually. I think you normally see it maybe February, maybe September, I don't know. Obviously, you guys didn't get that opportunity this year because of the transition between myself and Casey. So we're bringing it to you now. I don't know exactly, we have had some discussions where that'll land in the future, but expect that to be done annually. I don't know that some of this has actually been shared with you, but this is something that I have always done with my Board of Education. But I want you guys to know because it's important, even like some of the questions that Linda was bringing up and like, how do we get here? Like, yeah, we are maintaining our systems. We are maintaining our buildings. Again, like why we have this huge buildup, I think Annalee kind of put it into context pretty good earlier, but we do have a preventative maintenance plan on our mechanical systems. We have preventative maintenance plans on our roofing systems, asphalt surfaces, gym floor. I think Andy, he stole my thunder a little bit. I was going to actually use your vehicle as an example, but obviously I hope you all are checking your tire pressures. I hope you're all changing your oil. I hope that you're, every so many thousand miles you should be doing transmission flushes and coolant flushes. We're doing those things to our systems. I've listed 5 here, and we're literally doing that on the vehicles and the grounds equipment that I've put up there. So those things are happening. Also, there's required things, right? So to meet code, to meet compliance, to be compliance, we have to have fire inspections. Our extinguishers annually have to be tested. Our custodians is a recommendation. They aren't doing that, but they will be doing that. But monthly, we should be checking those on our own. Sprinkler systems annually, we have to have those tested. We have to, every 5 years, we have to have a different type of test done. Same with extinguishers. There's different years that extinguishers need certain testing. So these things are happening. Bleacher inspections. We're fortunate to be in a district that's very competitive, and when you have all that competition, we have a lot of people jumping around and celebrating in the stands. That wreaks havoc on our bleachers. Therefore, we need to have bleacher inspections. We have to touch the nuts and bolts. We have to check the crossbars. Everybody know what grease interceptors are? So we have to maintain those. Those are in our kitchen. It basically removes the grease before the water goes downstream and gets into, gets back to the treatment plant. Stormwater, we have obviously retention ponds. Our groundskeepers are taking care of those and working with the city. Backflow preventers, I think you guys get the idea. There's a lot of systems that we are taking care of, and that's part of that operational budget. And then capital projects, no surprise, right? Like what's the theme tonight? That's what's been happening. Casey had a plan. I looked at the plan. Maybe we do some adjustments, again, because now we have some new data. But annually, for that capital budget, we're gonna be replacing mechanical components. You'll hear more about what we did really since I've joined the district. But we'll do roofing replacements, asphalt replacements, and concrete repairs and replacements. So now I'm just gonna take you through a list of what we've been kind of accomplishing since I joined the district. So again, some of these projects started before me, but I included them because they did conclude under my watch. Tech ed area, univent replacements, again, older equipment that we do have data on the actual dates of the equipment, and then our mechanical contractor does track those repairs, something that down the road I would like to track on our own. But those came due, too many issues involved with them, so Casey made that decision to move forward with replacing those univents, and then obviously I saw that through. 3 roof sections at the high school. If you haven't seen the crane outside, there it is. It's gone now. But we did 3 roof sections at the high school that I'll get a little bit more in depth shortly. Asphalt section at the front of the stadium. Literally, this kind of smaller section was the worst asphalt section in our district. We have something like 32 roof asphalt sections across the district, 28. The worst one was in front of that stadium, so we took care of that this summer. Next one is really Pleasant View, but we'll see what kind of winter weather we have. We'll see what the salt and the plow trucks do to the sections, and we might have to adjust. Sports turf field, I put that up there. That was really under Casey's watch, but I made sure that I helped get the fence up. So that was the last part of that project. Again, just to step back a little bit, like I would like to, annually, this won't be spread over like some weird amount of months where the project starts and ends. It'll be more consistent with maybe the fiscal year, but again, this is stuff that I picked up when I joined. Concrete hazards, there's a lot of concrete hazards around the district. I already prefaced the one outside the UCC here. We know that there's that one up by the high school, but that one is a large ticket item because of the type of work. Literally, that whole thing is attached together, and we would literally have to pull the door frame out to really do that project right and repair the step, right? So I am looking at like short-term solutions for that still, but the proper replacement, and I preface that because I think that's important to you, and like you want to know that we're doing the proper things, and that's what my intention is. But unfortunately, I can't prevent somebody from replacing me 30 years from now and having the same challenges and discussions at our board, but I do like to think that I am setting up whoever succeeds me with some good systems and a good plan. I made a mistake there. It looks like the exterior clad at the high school, I put repaired. That should be, going to be repaired. That's still not done. If anybody's heading up to the main entrance of the front high school, there's a wonderful sheet of plywood attached to the underside of the main entrance. That should be done before school starts. They're the same company that's doing the roofing is doing that work. They wanted to wrap up the roofing, and while the crane's gone, they are still actively working on the roof. That would be the next project that they're tackling. Concession stand roofing, I don't know how public this got, but I mean, they're staining on the outside of that. The roof was leaking, the water was getting into the insulation and started actually bleeding through the exterior fascia or wall covering and staying in it, so we're taking care of that. That's a focal point, but again, that's a good example of how we sometimes have to adjust, and then obviously we talked about the pool and gutters. So the crane is not as important as the picture in the middle and the picture on the right. The the picture on the right, this is one of the first things, like Andy talked about, like what's behind the walls, what's up in the ceilings. Sometimes we might have a project scoped out, budgets look good, and then we run into things. So that's just inevitable. This, where you see that open cavity and big crack, nobody understands why that's there, but there was no decking over that. Literally, that was a trampoline. Like, not that you would have went on there and started jumping around, but there was nothing under that. Like, for that to last as long as it did, without somebody walking across that and sinking in or whatever, we find things like that. Worse off, kind of really what I'm trying to show is not the workers, but the wall behind the workers. It wasn't supported, it wasn't even tied into the building. So literally, it was like taking a piece of plywood and me holding it together like this. That's all that was happening. So unfortunately, we had to rebuild that and tie that into the building. So really what I guess I'm trying to message here is we don't know what we're always getting into. And again, like under my watch, I hope that things don't get by me like that. But when we're managing safety, utilities, hiring processes, we then have to rely on people like these, and I think we do a good job of vetting that process and vetting those people to ensure that they're helping us out. And then here's just some examples of the concrete. Did everybody see, you know, like if you've been up to the high school, the wonderful like 2-inch like steps that weren't supposed to be 2-inch steps that happened because ground was settling. So we addressed most of those. Again, trying to balance that capital budget. So would I like to do it all at once? Well, I have a lot that I need to tackle. So at Southwood Glen, we replaced 4 air-cooled condensing units. Again, reached their life expectancy. As I mentioned earlier, as soon as I came on board, that was one of my first challenges, kind of like baptized through that process, but the hot water heater went on us and we had to replace that, and then that's when I was made aware of these domestic hot water lines that were springing leaks, so that got taken care of over the summer. Well, actually a lot was happening over at Southwood Glen. I really commend Zach Narlock for coordinating so much in the building. And then we did some updates to the lighting system. That was something that was kind of already moving forward when I came and I kind of saw that process through. The nice thing about updating lighting processes, we do start getting old lighting systems, again, life expectancies. You start having part issues. You start having fixtures that are literally the heat from those, they start to crumble, lamp ends start crumbling. So if we can make some of those things work, those types of projects support us in the operational budget because we'll see a utility savings. Which, by the way, I am tracking all of our utilities starting when I started here. It was not being done. I am tracking those, and I'm excited to maybe someday share some of that data with you guys because we did roll out an energy management plan as well. So there you go. You guys want maybe 5 minutes to look at those? I think so. Pleasant View, we completed lighting as well there. We also had a domestic hot water heating system issue there. We replaced that domestic hot water heater, and then there was an exterior gym wall, more building envelope stuff. So some of like the building wall exterior improvements would be the category that would have fell under. The domestic hot water system would have fell under building systems, under mechanical or HVAC, and obviously the lighting would have fell under the electrical. So again, under building systems, and just trying to tie that back a little bit.
Andy, out of say it's $1.2 million that was budgeted for buildings and grounds, how much was spent on what we planned to spend it on, and how much was spent on a hot water heater at Southwood Glen, for instance?
So I can tell you, I absorbed that into the operational budget because I was still learning the budget at that moment. And I feel like if I manage these things well, then maybe I can handle some of those replacements outside of the capital. Obviously, there's some other protocols we have to follow, like assets and making sure we're tracking some of those things. But honestly, like if we have a good snow removal year, we can do some shifting. If I'm doing good with the utilities, we can do some shifting. Those are the types of conversations that I would bring either directly to Andy or even to the cabinet and say, like, I'm trending very well. Like, I want to start tackling some more of those projects, which those conversations did happen this year. So not because of my work, but even like Casey's work. So
I would just add, part of a sound capital improvement plan. So if we have the $1.2 million, is not budgeting every single cent of the $1.2 million, because regardless of how we plan, something will come up during 23, 24.
Right.
So having some contingency to repair those, because the examples Andy brings up can go in reverse too. We could have the worst winter on history, and instead of saving money on salt, we double the salt cost. Or again, worst winter in history, and our energy bills go through the roof because we're heating a minus 10-degree month versus a 30-degree month, right? So, I know I gave people shivers, but like, those go in reverse too. So part of our job, in working together with Andy is coordinating, how does our CIP budget include some contingency for the hot water heater that goes, that's just, we haven't planned for it, but it goes.
Sure. Is it like 2/3, 1/3? Is it?
I have historically, over the last like 7, 8 years, operated with 10% of the capital improvement budget as a pretty good indicator of kind of these unplanned capital improvement projects. But that's not to say that, like to your example of the roof, straight line wind peeling off a roof, and now that's $500,000.
Right.
It just is.
Right, yes.
Because those roofs, they don't have 30-year warranties on them.
So 10% kind of answers your question.
But 10%.
Even if you get a 30-year warranty, good luck. Yeah, we can move on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some more pictures. I mean, obviously the roof or the gym wall, PV and the domestic hot water heater. I just coupled these together, Ben Franklin, we also did the LED update. Country Dale, fire alarm system, and then the ECC, we replaced the rooftop that I think I had mentioned earlier. But that's fun, right? There's a strobe. District projects, I kind of coupled, there are projects that touch multiple buildings. So again, something that was already put into motion prior to me joining was replacing the interactive boards. Again, the IT department, they have their own list. Food service has their own list, which, by the way, I want to come back to that facility study that we did. That all of our data wasn't into one spot, but now it is, okay? But information, IT department was having issues with the smart boards. Everybody's familiar with the smart board likely. As those start failing, how do we set up on a replacement cycle? How do we replace it with what's the next best technology? So that actually happened over the summer. And then, Mary, I think it was you that brought up like safety. We had a mishmash of camera systems. We had licenses that were not renewed. That's not on the district. Certain vendors that we work with sometimes don't help us out with those things. So we're gonna standardize that, and we're updating the camera system. That's actually not started, but that's coming. And it actually will standardize it and make it very user-friendly. When I joined this team and met with the principals, that question kept coming up, like, I don't even know what a camera's made. This doesn't even cover this area. So we did a survey of that, and we're taking care of that. And then same with proximity access system. And why does that become a priority? Because it is around safety, okay? So safety is always one of those questions, like how does this support our safety measures? Again, we didn't have proximity access only at any of the elementaries or here. It's only at the high school and middle school. And that really supports us in managing who's coming and going out of our buildings, trying to direct them through the doors that we want them to go through, and also gets rid of a lot of other challenges that just staff work with.
Like, what is that? Just very.
Oh, I'm
brief.
so sorry. Proximity access?
Scan your badge at the door.
Badge at the door, got it.
Rather than a hard key.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, card
Badge
access,
versus.
Bob's.
You said card access, I would've got it.
It's funny because you're not the first to call me out on that. So this just gives you a snapshot, so right now the operational budget's right around 1.2 million. Capital budget, we got 1.825 in there, but 400,000 of that was allocated from 446. So those are for the identified projects that are underway or have already completed.
Is the capital budget live in Fund 46 or where?
I'll let I love this district. I had never had a Fund 46. It makes my life easier because I don't have to live by the fiscal year. Our last district literally started it when I left with $1 in it. So it does make some flexibility for me, but I know I could answer it, but I think Andy might explain it better.
Yep, so out of here, the capital budget, what's being allocated in 23-24 is like 1.26 million. In working with Andy, he's identified $400,000 of new projects from Fund 46, and then what makes up the remainder of the capital budget is just some carryover from things from 22-23. So those interactive boards were really well in play beforehand. That's carrying over into the fiscal year, but that was intended to come out of Fund 46 already. So that's adding to that total. So we're still at that 1.26 of new dollars, 400 of Fund 46. But what changed, or what will change, is our capital budget in Fund 10 is essentially one line item. It's a transfer of that $1.2 million to Fund 46. In Fund 46, we line item all of that. The reason being, and I think I've talked about this before, is it's much harder to fall within our fiscal year on projects just because of timelines of vendors. Material delays, especially over the last 3 years, really since COVID, material delays have been like horrendous in lots of areas. So by taking that capital budget and letting it live in Fund 46, even though we expense it out of Fund 10, but we let it live in Fund 46, we don't have to worry about crossing fiscal years at all. So auditors consider Fund 46 as a fluid, just movement of dollars, where Fund 10 has that hard June 30th date. So our initial 1.2 will always live in Fund 10, or whatever we decide to raise that to or lower it to. That will always live in Fund 10, but it'll live as simply a transfer amount. We'll make the actual living budget work in Fund 46.
And Andy, that's living in the 1.8 that we're looking at on the slide deck right now.
Yep,
So
correct.
the slide's kind of, if you're looking at it, it would look like 1.2 plus 1.8 maybe. 1.8 is the total, it was the 1.2 in the operations that goes to 46, and then additional money put into projects this year.
Anybody have any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
23-24 policy review schedule. Ms. Bennett, please.
Absolutely. So as we're aware, we're a district that reviews our cycles on our policies on a 5-year cycle. So this is just the update for 23-24 school year. What policies will be up, when you'll see them, and which departments own those. So pretty standard, just to come information only. Any questions?
No.
All right. Thank you. Pretty straightforward.
Seeing none?
Do you have a question?
I can't get into the file, but that's, hold on.
Tuition waiver. So the tuition waiver is on here. I'm looking for a motion to approve the 9-week tuition waiver as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion was made by Dr. Beer, seconded by Mrs. Yank. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Treasurer's report is available in board docs. Board liaison reports and school and community engagement reports.
Just want to say that I believe that our county executive will be in the building or in our Saber Center next Thursday as a budget hearing.
Yep, correct.
Oh, there's a town hall, yeah.
Let's go and ask him to upgrade the sports complex.
Okay,
Okay?
good luck with that.
And anybody else? I know there's a lot happening, but
In the interest of time.
yeah, please continue to go to those things.
To be engaged.
Future agenda items, summer school report, master facilities study discussion, Southwood Glen Elementary School presentation. It'll be nice to see kids in here again. Athletics and activities report. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Could I just make a suggestion, maybe at the next, or at the meeting where we're doing the master facilities study discussion, maybe that could be the only thing, or some one other small, minute item, because I don't feel that we do our best work when we've sat here for 4 hours plus. So I just would suggest that
It was a
that
very good
agenda is
presentation.
very
It was a
light.
very good detailed
Agree
presentation,
completely.
you know, but I think it was.
You're right, I don't have any stamina left. Right, yeah,
Agree completely.
thank you.
Thank you.
We need a second.
Oh, second.
I did a second.
Okay.
Dr. Khan, seconded by Mrs. Larson or Mrs. Sapersky, I'm not sure. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 10:08. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob,